When I came back home for the first time in months, I discovered that the house filled with memories of my childhood was being put up for sale. Since you always encouraged me to follow my own path, I did just that exactly as I pleased. If there's compensation required, you should be the one to cover it. After all, it's your house. This is my way of getting back at you for constantly belittling me because of my financial status. Go to hell. My husband Ken and my mother-in-law Lisa, both of whom came from modest backgrounds, sold the house without my consent while I was away. They profited from the sale and intentionally breached the contract, mocking me, the rightful owner, and making me responsible for the compensation resulting from their actions. They were completely unaware of the consequences their selfishness would bring. Their actions not only disregarded my feelings but also disrespected my parents. I can never forgive them for this. I have to cover the costs because it's my house. You better settle up quickly. If you insist, then this house is no longer mine. And as for Ken and Lisa, they'll face the consequences of their actions. I've been married to Ken for 10 years. We've known each other since childhood and have been together since we were young. We're in a marriage where my socioeconomic status is considerably higher than Ken's. I come from a family of business owners and have always enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. Ken, on the other hand, was raised in a single-parent household and didn't have the same financial stability. Despite this, my parents and I were drawn to Ken's character, so his background never concerned us. In fact, my parents have always treated him like their own son. My parents decided to move into another property my father owns to enjoy their retirement, so we now live in the house where my parents used to reside. This was part of their plan to support us as much as they could. We need to officially transfer the ownership of the house soon. Once that's done, you'll have full control over it. I assume you're planning to move at some point. Perhaps you could use the funds for that. A few months ago, my father informed me that he intended to give me the family home. Although the house was well maintained and perfectly livable, it was too large for us since we'd chosen not to have children. I expressed my gratitude to my parents, and even though the ownership transfer wasn't complete yet, I began coordinating with the real estate company. Hey Ken, I need you to fill out this form. If I don't submit it today, we'll miss the deadline. How can we sell the house without this? I'll just write it down then. You're overreacting. If you submit it today, you'll meet the deadline. You don't need to remind me every single time, just handle it on your own. Where did his kind and sincere personality go? Since our marriage, Ken has become increasingly lazy and has left everything up to me. He routinely asks me to handle important documents on his behalf. If I refuse, I end up creating problems for the family, so I usually end up doing it myself to keep things running smoothly. I wonder if he'll continue to treat me like a servant. We decided to sell the house we're currently living in and have selected a new place that will be better for us. But I've been anxious about the future of our marriage with Ken and whether this decision is the right one. Then, one day, I received a call that my parents had been seriously injured in a car accident. I rushed to the hospital to be with them. While my parents survived, they were facing a 6-month recovery period and would need support for about 3 months. I need to ask Ken. I'll also check with my company to see if I can adjust my work schedule. I'll be the one to support them. I asked my husband if I could stay with my parents for an extended period to help them. He responded with a casual, "It's okay, it's your thing," and agreed without much concern, which felt more like indifference than genuine worry for my parents. Anyway, I could go and support my parents now. But then another concern crossed my mind. Would Ken be able to manage on his own while I'm away? Ken is the type of person who can't handle house chores. He might be able to feed himself, but washing his own clothes or remembering to take out the trash is beyond him. I definitely don't want our house turning into a mess. I was a bit hesitant, but I decided to explain the situation to my mother-in-law, Lisa, and ask for her help with Ken. Please feel free to use anything and do whatever you need around the house, I told her. Oh my, you're really in a tough spot, aren't you, Mary? I'm sure your parents have enough funds to hire someone to help them. Or are you just missing your own parents? Lisa said with a hint of sarcasm. Don't worry, I'll take good care of my son. You can stay as long as you need, even longer than 3 months if necessary. Lisa clearly loves Ken very much and probably resents me for taking her son away. I was uncomfortable with her sarcastic remarks during our conversations, but I thanked her while keeping my frustration in check, knowing she was my only option for support at the moment. I gathered what I needed and headed to my parents' place. Every day was a whirlwind, and 3 months flew by. I wasn't able to stay in touch with Ken as often as I'd hoped. But it was worth it. My parents were improving day by day. Once the recovery was in a stable place, I was ready to return home. I got into the car and drove back, leaving the natural beauty of the town behind. As I approached the familiar landscape, I finally arrived home. But the house was no longer what I remembered. A for sale sign was posted out front, and the real estate agency listed on the sign was unfamiliar to me. What's going on? Panicking, I called Ken. On the other end of the line, Ken let out a snort of laughter, almost as if he were mocking me. I sold the house and moved back to my parents' place. I did everything for you while you were away, he said. I couldn't make sense of Ken's words, so I went straight to my in-laws' house to get an explanation. When I arrived at my in-laws' home, which was just a 5-minute drive away, the first thing I noticed was a pile of my personal belongings stacked up at the front door. I was shocked and confused. "Excuse me, I'm just passing through," I said. A contractor who had been behind me rang the doorbell, exchanged some paperwork with Lisa, and then loaded my belongings into his truck before driving off. Shortly after, Ken emerged from the house. Both Lisa and Ken looked pleased as they counted the money they had received from the contractor. They were dressed in fancy clothes, and their car had been replaced with a luxury model. I barely recognized them. "Hey Lisa, what's going on?" I confronted her, my panic evident. "What are you talking about?" Lisa replied dismissively. "I cleared out your stuff from the house. You bought all that unnecessary junk. I guess daughters like you just don't know how to take care of your own belongings, probably because you've always had everything handed to you." She continued with a scornful tone, "You're such an unfit wife for prioritizing your parents over your own husband for so long. I pity Ken for having a wife like you. That's why I even suggested he divorce you. Since the house is now in your name, I decided to claim it as alimony." Lisa flashed a smug smile and added, "I found a real estate company willing to pay a very good price, so I sold it quickly. You always told me I could do whatever I wanted, so I did just that." She then showed me the contract she had with a real estate company, which was dated about a month ago. But that house should have already been under contract with another agency, right? And any contract regarding the house without my signature would be invalid. Lisa's condescension was evident as she explained the situation. "You went ahead and made a contract without informing me, so now there will be consequences, and they'll demand compensation." I panicked and tried to explain to Lisa the potential repercussions of her actions. "But I already heard from Ken that you signed a contract with another real estate agency without even consulting him," I said. "That's not my concern," Lisa replied dismissively. "I just did what you did, handled things on my own. I don't care who signed the contract or what's involved, it's your usual approach, right? So if compensation needs to be paid, it's your responsibility. It's your house." She shrugged, clearly believing Ken's version of the story, which was presented from a victimized perspective. I realized there was nothing more I could say to Lisa, so I turned to Ken, hoping for some support. To my shock, Ken was staring at me with the same sarcastic smile as Lisa. Finally, the day had come. This was his revenge. "You've always mocked me for being poor, haven't you?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I'm the only one in the family who lived by different standards and values. You and your parents must have found that amusing. I've always felt miserable with you. If you find poverty so amusing, then I'll show you what money can do. I won't accept that you're the only one who gets to live comfortably. Go to hell." Ken, filled with resentment, slapped the divorce papers in front of me. They were all signed except for my signature. I considered having my mother handle everything, but I wanted my revenge to be complete. What a dramatic turn of events, I thought. This is quite the scene. The young lady who mocked the poor is now being put in her place. There's no one here to bail you out now. What are you going to do about it? Ken and Lisa seemed to revel in their satisfaction, clearly excited about what they had done. But my frustration with them eventually turned into a calm realization. They were making a grave mistake. "Sorry to interrupt your little celebration," I said, "but this house isn't mine. You're the ones heading to hell." I decided it was time to reveal the truth. There was no longer any reason to protect them. I pulled a document from my bag and held it up for them to see. "This is the official registry for the house. As I mentioned during our phone call, the ownership has been transferred to Ken's name. The process was delayed due to my parents' accident, but the transfer was completed just a week ago. right around the time you both decided to sell the house. Ken and Lisa looked at each other in confusion. "Oh, I didn't hear anything about this," Lisa said. "Of course you didn't," I replied. "I tried to confirm with you if I should send the paperwork, but you just dismissed me and told me to handle it. You probably don't even remember, but I double-checked with you to make sure everything was okay." Ken stared at the registry document, clearly in disbelief. "Be careful," he warned. Lisa, equally shocked, confronted me. "What's the meaning of this?" I took a deep breath. This was my parents' wish. They always treated Ken like their own son and respected you, Lisa, for raising such a wonderful man. When they decided to give us the house, they believed Ken would always take good care of me. And it was also a gesture of appreciation for you, Lisa, for all the effort you put into raising him. And yet you not only betrayed me but also disrespected my parents' sincere feelings. Ken and Lisa went pale as they absorbed my parents' true feelings. Their hands, which had been covering their mouths, were trembling. As I mentioned earlier, this situation will involve both real estate agencies. Expect that they will demand a substantial amount in compensation. I will contact the agency I originally worked with, I continued. Could you both please get in touch with the agency you used for the sale? I still can't believe that agency accepted your sloppy explanations and signed the contract, I added, growing more assertive. If you have a problem, don't act like scum. Speak up earlier rather than making a mess of things. It's not that you're poor because of money, you're poor in spirit. My tone grew firmer as I accused them loudly. I was about to pull out my cell phone to call the real estate agency when Ken suddenly interjected. Wait a minute. This isn't what I wanted, Ken said, panic evident in his voice. I was just upset because you left me. Let's work this out together as a couple. He continued, I could buy the house that's on the market now, and we could call the old real estate agency to make this whole thing disappear. You have the means to do that, don't you? Please? Ken, who had been siding with Lisa, was now desperately trying to reconcile with me. His attempts to soothe the situation were evident, but he seemed oblivious to how self-serving and insincere his approach sounded. Ken, are you betraying me now? I demanded. I made all the arrangements for you, and now you're abandoning your own mother to put your wife first. What a heartless son. I turned to Lisa. From what you said earlier, it's scum-like to prioritize parents, right? So you're lucky Ken isn't scum. You should be grateful he's a good son. Lisa looked indignant at Ken's actions but seemed to realize that her own words had backfired. She was left speechless. That's right, Ken said, attempting to placate me. You're the most important person to me right now, Mary. I'm going to change my attitude and do my best. I cut him off. Don't misunderstand. No one's talking about forgiving you. Ken, relieved that Lisa had been silenced, reached out to take my hand. I pulled it away and glared at him coldly. I'm already fed up with your laziness, I said sharply. And when things go wrong, you always blame others. You leave others to handle your problems. How can I trust you to change? I looked him straight in the eye. Let me be clear, I'm not your secretary or your servant. If you're an adult, you should at least take responsibility for your actions, I said firmly. You and Lisa will pay for this for the rest of your lives. With that, I snatched the divorce papers from Ken's hand, stamped my signature on the spot, and left them both in shock. Despite some complications, the divorce from my ex-husband was successfully finalized. Ken and Lisa tried to sue my family, claiming we had deceived them and were responsible for compensation. Naturally, they lost. As expected, they are now liable for compensation from both real estate agencies and are facing a substantial financial burden due to their malicious actions. On top of that, they seem to be blaming each other for their troubles. It looks like they'll be in a dire situation for a long time. Meanwhile, my company arranged for me to continue working remotely so I could support my parents. I moved back to their place and resumed helping them while working from home. Honey, your bath is ready, I called out. Thank you, my mother replied. I'll wash the dishes so you can get in the bath first today. You must be tired after your rehab session. Actually, you should get in first, Mary, my father said. I'll join later. I also want to clean the bathtub, so you should relax while I take care of that. My parents are still undergoing rehabilitation from the accident, but they continue to support each other and enjoy their time together. Living with them again has been heartwarming. Watching them in their enduring harmony has made me reflect on my past marriage with Ken. I realized that what was missing in that relationship was mutual respect and consideration. There were certainly things I could have done to be more considerate, but looking back, I don't believe Ken and Lisa ever had those feelings for me. Initially, I felt quite sad and frustrated about the divorce. But now I can say with confidence that it was for the best. If I ever meet someone again, I'll need to be extremely cautious. I hope never to cause my mom and dad any more worry. I've decided to take the lessons learned from the ordeal with Ken and Lisa and apply them to the rest of my life. I will always remember to thank my parents and never forget their support as I start my new life in a new place.
Evelyn, what gave you the nerve to walk out on Jack? Have you forgotten your duties as his wife? You're going to regret this, mark my words. Linda's voice pierced through the small, cluttered living room like a dagger. Her eyes bored into me, seething with barely contained anger. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Linda, I have my reasons for leaving, I said calmly, though my heart pounded in my chest. Linda scoffed, crossing her arms. Reasons? What reasons could possibly justify abandoning your husband? It all flashed before my eyes. The years of watching Jack's calm demeanor turn into cold indifference. The strain of the recession stealing his job, and with it, our peace. Our 6-year marriage had started with promise, his dreams aligning with mine like two perfect puzzle pieces. But life, it seemed, had other plans. Jack hadn't taken well to job hunting. Weeks turned into months, his frustration mounting as every application went unanswered. Meanwhile, my own modest income from graphic design barely kept us afloat. Jack hasn't found a job in months, Linda. We've been struggling to survive. It's not about abandonment. It's about survival, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Struggling? Linda's eyebrows shot up. Is that what you call it when my son desperately searches for work while you prance around in front of a computer all day? A swell of anger rose in me. I work long hours to pay the bills. Jack isn't the only one affected here. He's a man, Evelyn. He has pride. He can't just take any job. Do you know how that would look? What people would say? She challenged. That's the problem, Linda, I said through gritted teeth. He's letting his pride come before our needs. Just then the front door creaked open. Jack stepped inside, looking gaunt and haggard. His eyes widened when he saw our confrontation. What's going on here? He asked, his voice tired. I turned to face him. We were just discussing why I left, I said, squaring my shoulders. Jack, we need to find a solution that works for both of us. This can't go on. Jack's face tightened. We're fine. I'll find something soon. You just need to be patient. Patient? I echoed, my voice rising. I've been patient. All I'm asking is that we make changes before we lose everything. A heavy silence fell over the room. Linda glared at me with venomous eyes, but it was Jack's look of helplessness that cut the deepest. He sank into the worn-out armchair, head in his hands. I'm trying, Evelyn. I really am. We need to move to a more affordable place, I said, reaching for his hand. It doesn't make sense to stay here when we can barely keep up. No, Jack said forcefully, pulling away. We are not moving. I refuse to give my mother something else to criticize. And that's what this is about. I shot back, the frustration boiling over. Your pride and your mother's judgment are more important than our stability. Linda's face turned red with fury. How dare you speak to him like that? After everything he's been through? We've all been through enough, I said, my voice breaking. Jack, you need to listen to me. If we don't change something, we're going to fall apart. Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. Maybe you're the one who's falling apart, Evelyn. I stood there, stunned. His words cut deeper than I'd expected. I turned away, biting back the tears. I need to go, I whispered, grabbing my coat. Running away again? Linda taunted, but I didn't look back. Evelyn, wait, Jack called, but I was already out the door, the cold air hitting me hard. As I walked away from the house, from Jack and Linda, one thought kept spinning in my mind. I had my reasons, and I knew, deep down, I needed to stand by them. I sat in my car, the engine humming softly as I stared at the road ahead. Moving to a cheaper apartment was a bitter pill, but it was the only way forward. When I walked in the door, Jack was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, eyes glazed over. We need to talk, I said, setting my bag down. He barely glanced up. About what? I found a more affordable apartment. It's in a nice area and we could save a lot, I explained, hoping he'd understand. Jack's expression turned stony. We're not moving. I'm not dragging my reputation through the mud just to save a few bucks. It's not about that, I sighed. It's about making sure we can survive this. His jaw clenched. You don't get it, do you? My mother will never let us hear the end of it. At least think about it, I pleaded. We're drowning here. Just then, the door flew open, and Linda stormed in, her eyes blazing. What's this I hear about moving? Jack shot me a warning look, but I couldn't hold back anymore. We need to find somewhere affordable, Linda. We're just managing to scrape by. Jack told me you're pushing for this ridiculous idea. Linda's voice was sharp. You just want to make my son look like a failure. That's not true, I retorted, feeling the anger rise again. I'm trying to help. Help? She scoffed. By belittling him? He's a man. He needs to look after his family. I am looking after my family, Jack muttered, looking defeated. Really? I shot back. By turning down jobs because they're beneath you? We can't afford to be picky right now. Linda stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. My son deserves better than to be degraded by some insignificant job. You're the one who needs to step up. I shook my head. This isn't about ego. This is about keeping a roof over our heads. How dare you? Linda hissed. You've always wanted to undermine Jack. I felt an icy fury build inside me. This isn't about you, Linda. This is about us. And if you're not going to be supportive, stay out of it. Supportive? She laughed bitterly. You couldn't handle your responsibilities, and now you want to run away. Enough, Jack shouted, standing up. Both of you, enough. He turned to me, eyes pleading. Stop making this harder. I looked at him, frustration gnawing at me. Don't you see? We need a change. Jack turned away, shaking his head. I can't do this, he muttered. I grabbed my bag and moved to the door. If you change your mind, let me know. But I can't keep living like this. Linda's sneer followed me out. Go on. Leave. See if the world cares about your pity party. As the door slammed behind me, the weight of it all hit me. I was fighting a losing battle. Jack's pride and Linda's venomous grip were stronger than our love, but I couldn't let that destroy me. I had to fight for my own sanity, even if it meant stepping away. The cold air outside felt liberating compared to the suffocating atmosphere inside the house. I walked down the street, my mind racing. I needed a plan, a new start. Linda's words echoed in my head, but I shook them off. It wasn't pity I needed, it was resolve. I spent the night with my thoughts, figuring out steps to take, starting with visiting a more affordable place. The road ahead seemed daunting, but it was a journey I had to make. Jack's refusal to see reason and Linda's relentless criticism showed me I had to look out for myself. It was time to reclaim my life. I walked into the apartment that Jack and I had shared for 6 years, feeling the suffocating weight of our unresolved issues. The living room, once full of warmth, now felt cold and uninviting. Boxes were scattered everywhere, remnants of my attempt to create some semblance of order in our chaotic life. Jack was at the table, our usual dinner routine, disrupted by the silence that followed my recent suggestions. Tonight I had managed to make a simple meal, pasta and salad. It wasn't much, but it was all I had time for after working a full day. Is this it? Jack asked, poking at his food with a fork. There was annoyance in his voice. It's all I could manage, I replied, tiredly sinking into the chair opposite him. This is what it's come to, he continued, not meeting my eyes. We're seriously living off scraps now? I'm sorry, Jack, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There's only so much I can do. I've been working long hours, handling everything here. We need to cut back. He slammed his fork down, startling me. You think I'm just sitting here enjoying this? You think this is what I wanted? I took a deep breath, feeling the tension rise. No, I don't. But you're not helping by refusing to make changes. We have to be realistic. Realistic? He scoffed. You're the one who's given up. You've been distant, always criticizing. I'm not criticizing, I said, struggling to keep my frustration in check. I'm trying to find solutions. We can't go on like this. And what about you? He shot back. You think you're perfect? You neglect everything else just to keep that job. I'm neglecting? The accusation stung. I'm the one keeping us afloat. He pushed his chair back violently, causing it to topple over. Enough. I don't need your lectures. Suddenly, the door opened, and Linda walked in, her eyes scanning the scene. What's going on now? She demanded, sensing the tension. Jack turned to her, gesturing toward the table. This is what we've been reduced to, Mom. Barely any food, constant arguments. Linda's eyes narrowed as she looked at me. This is unacceptable, Evelyn. You can't even manage a decent meal? Linda, I'm doing my best, I snapped, losing my patience. Working long hours doesn't leave much time for anything else. Your best? She sneered. Your best is what drove Jack to this point. Maybe if you took care of your responsibilities instead of running off to work, we wouldn't be in this mess. That's completely unfair, Linda, I said, my voice trembling. I've been handling everything while Jack... While Jack what? Linda interrupted. While Jack suffers because of your failures? Jack, looking defeated, sank back into his chair. He didn't defend me, didn't say a word. I need help, I almost whispered, looking at Jack. I can't do this alone. We don't need your pity, Linda spat. You will take care of this household properly, job or not. It's time you remembered your place as Jack's wife. Her words struck hard, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. I won't sacrifice everything just to live up to your expectations, Linda, I said, standing up. You'll do what's necessary, she replied, eyes cold and unrelenting. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. This isn't about you, I said, turning to leave. I've had enough. As I walked out, the finality of my decision hit me. This relentless cycle had to end. The house felt more like a battleground than a home, and I couldn't keep fighting a war where I was the only one seeking peace. I needed to reclaim my strength, even if it meant walking away from everything I once knew. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. The familiar sight brought a wave of mixed emotions, relief, guilt, and a trace of hope. As I stepped out of the car, the front door opened, and my mom, Susan, came rushing out. Evelyn, honey, she called, wrapping her arms around me in a warm hug. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks, Mom, I murmured, holding on tight. I didn't know where else to go. Come inside, she said softly, guiding me into the house. My dad, Tom, was sitting in the living room, his face lighting up when he saw me. Hey, kiddo, he greeted, standing up to give me a hug. Rough day, huh? You could say that, I replied, trying to smile. The warmth of my parents' home was comforting. It felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of my life with Jack and Linda. We sat down at the kitchen table, and my mom poured me a cup of tea. So what happened? She asked gently. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months. Jack and I have been struggling. He lost his job and refuses to find something new. I'm the only one working, and it's not enough. His mom keeps interfering, making everything worse. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Linda's always been difficult, but it sounds like things have gotten out of hand. They have, Dad. I suggested moving to a more affordable place, but Jack refuses. He's worried about what Linda will think, I said, feeling the frustration bubble up again. Susan's face tightened. And what did Linda say? She accused me of failing Jack. She wants me to quit my job and stay home, take care of everything, I admitted, feeling the anger rise. I can't do that. I shouldn't have to. Of course not, my dad said firmly. You've worked hard to build your career. There's nothing wrong with wanting to keep it. I just don't know what to do, I sighed. I love Jack, but he's changed, and Linda, she's toxic. Susan reached over and took my hand. You did the right thing by leaving, at least for now. You need space to figure things out. I can't keep living like this, I confessed, tears welling up in my eyes. I'm exhausted, and I feel like I'm losing myself. You need to take care of yourself first, Tom said. It's obvious Jack isn't seeing things clearly. Maybe time apart will make him realize what's important. Here, Susan said, sliding a box of tissues toward me. Stay here for as long as you need to. We'll help you figure this out. After talking with my parents, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way out of this mess. That night, I finally slept peacefully for the first time in months, feeling the comfort of being in a place where I was truly supported. Over the next few days, Jack called incessantly. The voicemails piled up, desperate, angry, pleading, but I didn't answer. I needed time to think, to heal. When I finally listened to one, his voice was strained. Evelyn, please come back. I can't do this without you. The house is falling apart. It was the confirmation I needed. He wasn't dealing with the reality of our situation. He was still relying on me to fix it all. One evening, my parents and I discussed my next steps. Have you considered your options? Tom asked, his voice gentle. I'm thinking about it, I confessed. But right now I just need to find my footing. And you will, Susan assured me. Take the time you need. We're here for you, no matter what. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my life again. Walking away wasn't an end. It was a chance for a new beginning. The resolve to find clarity and strength grew each day, bolstered by the unwavering support of my family. I approached the house cautiously, the place that once felt like home now tinged with apprehension. There was an eerie stillness as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The living room was surprisingly clean, almost too clean, as if no one had been living there. I called out, "Jack, are you here?" Silence. The air felt thick with expectation. I walked further in, noticing how empty it felt. The usual clutter was gone, the coziness replaced by a stark emptiness that sent a chill down my spine. I dialed Jack's number, the ringing echoing ominously. He picked up on the third ring. "Evelyn," his voice sounded strained. "Are you back?" "I'm at the house. Where are you?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I'm at Mom's," he admitted hesitantly. "I moved out, decided it was best, for now." I took a deep breath, trying to process the information. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought you wouldn't care," he said, almost defensively. "You left me." "I left because we needed a change," I replied, feeling the familiar frustration rise. "Moving to your mom's doesn't solve anything." There was a pause before he spoke again. "I'm trying, Evelyn. I didn't know what else to do." "This isn't the way to handle things," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Running back to Linda isn't the answer." There was silence on the line. I could almost picture him, sitting in Linda's pristine living room, the judgmental eyes of his mother piercing through him. "Jack, we need to talk face to face," I said firmly. "This isn't something we can solve over the phone." He hesitated. "Mom doesn't think it's a good idea." Anger flared up inside me. "Your mother doesn't get to decide what we do. We're adults. We make our own choices." "Evelyn, please," he started, but I cut him off. "I'm coming over," I said, my voice firm. "We're talking. End of discussion." I hung up before he could argue further and grabbed my keys. The drive to Linda's house was a blur of emotions, anger, frustration, a glimmer of hope that maybe this conversation could bring some clarity. I pulled up to Linda's grandiose house and braced myself. The door opened before I could knock, and there she stood, arms crossed, the disdain in her eyes burning. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "I need to talk to Jack," I said evenly. "You have nothing to discuss," she snapped. "You left him, remember?" "Jack is my husband," I replied, refusing to back down. "We need to talk." She was about to argue when Jack appeared behind her, looking tired and worn. "Let her in, Mom," he said quietly. Linda glared at me but stepped aside. I walked into their immaculate living room, feeling the weight of judgment in the air. Jack motioned for me to sit, but I stayed standing, needing the sense of control. "Jack, this isn't working," I began. "Moving back here isn't fixing anything. We need to figure out what we're going to do." "I know," he said, looking down, "but I can't face it on my own." "And you won't have to," I assured him. "But we need to make decisions together without outside interference." Linda suddenly stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Outside interference? Is that what you call a mother's concern?" "This is between Jack and me, Linda," I said firmly. "You need to let us handle our own lives." Jack looked torn, glancing between us. "Evelyn, can we just try to work this out? Maybe if we move back here temporarily?" I shook my head. "That's not a solution. We need our own space, a fresh start." Linda scoffed. "And where will that leave Jack? Struggling while you avoid your duties?" "No," I replied, my voice cold. "It leaves Jack and me finding a way forward that's best for both of us without being controlled by you." Jack sighed, looking defeated. "I don't know what to do, Evelyn." I softened, stepping closer. "We start by talking, communicating, not running away to our parents." He nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Linda opened her mouth to speak, but Jack held up a hand. "Mom, I need to figure this out with Evelyn." Her eyes blazed with anger, but she said nothing. I took Jack's hand, feeling a small surge of hope. We had a long way to go, but maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back. Linda and Jack were waiting as I arrived at the lawyer's office. Linda's glare could melt steel, but I held my ground. Jack sat next to her, looking defeated. The air was thick with tension, each second dragging like an eternity. The lawyer, a stern woman named Miss Harding, greeted us. "Let's get started," she said, guiding us into the conference room. We took our seats, and she began going over the paperwork. Linda couldn't keep quiet for long. "Evelyn, this is insanity. You're throwing away your marriage over some petty arguments." "Petty?" I shot back. "Do you have any idea what we've been through?" "Jack's been a good husband," Linda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "He deserves better than this." Jack squirmed in his seat but said nothing. I took a deep breath and looked straight at him. "Jack, we both know things haven't been right for a long time." He nodded slightly, not meeting my eyes. Miss Harding interjected, "Let's focus on the documents. Evelyn, you've made your intentions clear. Jack, do you have any objections?" Linda jumped in before Jack could answer. "Of course he objects. He's devastated." "Let him speak, Linda," I said firmly, my eyes locked on Jack. Jack finally looked up. "I don't want this," he said quietly, "but I can't keep living like this either." Linda's face turned red with anger. "You're really going to let her walk away? After everything?" "Linda, it's our decision," I said. "Your meddling has done enough damage." "How dare you?" she hissed, standing up. "I've only ever tried to help." "Help?" I laughed bitterly. "You've undermined every effort I've made to keep this marriage together. Your interference has driven us apart." Jack's eyes widened, the truth of my words sinking in. "Mom, Evelyn has a point. We need to sort this out ourselves." Linda looked like she'd been slapped. "You're choosing her over me?" "No one is choosing sides," Jack said, his voice shaking. "But we need to handle this, not you." Miss Harding cleared her throat, bringing us back to the matter at hand. "If we could return to the paperwork," I nodded, trying to focus on the tangible steps we were taking. As we worked through the details, Linda sat fuming, her eyes burning holes into me. The room felt like a pressure cooker, the tension building to a breaking point. Finally, Miss Harding handed over the last page. "Evelyn, if you can sign here." I took the pen, my hand trembling slightly, and signed. Then she handed it to Jack. He hesitated, looking at me one last time. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "I'm sure," I said softly. "We need to move on." He signed, and the papers were complete. Miss Harding gathered them up. "That concludes our session. You'll receive copies in the mail." As we stood to leave, Linda could hold back no longer. "Mark my words, Evelyn. You'll regret this. You're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you." I met her gaze, unwavering. "I'm doing what's best for both of us. You can't control us anymore." Jack looked at me, a mix of sadness and relief in his eyes. "Take care." "Evelyn." "You too, Jack," I replied, turning to leave. As I walked out of the office, the weight of the past years seemed to lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to navigate, no longer shackled by the toxic influences that had nearly consumed me. I was ready to reclaim my life and build a future on my own terms. I glanced around the empty apartment, feeling a strange sense of finality. The last of my possessions were packed, ready to be moved to my new place. I let out a deep breath, savoring the silence. It was a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined my life for so long. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Whatever you think you've won, remember you'll never escape the shame of your failure." I shook my head and dialed Rachel, my longtime friend. She picked up after the first ring. "Hey, need help with the move?" "More like moral support," I said, a hint of a smile playing on my lips. "I'll be right over," she replied, and I hung up, feeling a little lighter already. Rachel arrived soon after, her presence a comforting reminder of the support I had outside the toxic relationships I'd left behind. "Ready to start fresh?" she asked, giving me a hug. "More than ready," I said. "Let's get this show on the road." We loaded the boxes into her car, working quickly and efficiently. As we finished, I took one last look around the apartment. "Good riddance," I muttered under my breath. Rachel smirked. "Onward and upward, Evelyn." When we arrived at my new place, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The apartment was small but cozy, the perfect blank slate for building my new life. We spent the afternoon unpacking, laughter and conversation filling the empty spaces as the new chapter of my life began to take shape. Then, unexpectedly, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Jack. I hesitated but answered. "Hello?" "Evelyn, I just wanted to check in," he said, sounding unsure. "I heard you moved out." "I did," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's time for a new start." He sighed, the weight of regret evident. I'm sorry for everything. I should have listened more, fought harder for us. It's too late now, Jack, I said gently. We both have to move on. I know, he said quietly. Take care, Evelyn. You too, I replied, ending the call. Rachel looked at me questioningly. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, pocketing my phone. Just part of closing the chapter. The sun started to set, casting a warm glow over the apartment. We shared a simple meal on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes but filled with a sense of hope and possibility. Just then, there was a loud, furious knock at the door. My heart rate spiked. Rachel went to open it, and there stood Linda, her eyes flashing with anger. Thought you could just run away? No, Linda, I said, stepping forward, feeling Rachel's reassuring presence beside me. I'm moving on with my life. You can't control me anymore. You ungrateful, she started, but I cut her off. This is my home now. You're not welcome here, I said firmly, standing my ground. You'll regret this, she spat, but the words held less power now. Jack will never recover from what you've done. Jack and I will both find our own ways forward, I said, closing the door. Goodbye, Linda. Rachel locked it firmly behind her and then turned to me. Well, she's a piece of work. I laughed, feeling lighter. That's the last time she sets foot in my life. We finished unpacking, each box emptied, symbolizing a step towards reclaiming my independence. By the end of the night, the apartment felt more like a home. It wasn't just about moving to a new place. It was about reclaiming my life and my identity. As Rachel left, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed one last time, but this time it was a message from a potential job opportunity. Things were finally looking up. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to travel, and that made all the difference. With a sense of resolve, I closed the curtains and turned off the lights, looking forward to a new dawn in the morning. Morning light filtered through the curtains of my new apartment, a fresh start greeting me. I felt a sense of calm and readiness for the day ahead, my steps lighter as I moved through the cozy space. The chaos and suffocation of the past felt like a distant memory. As I sipped my coffee, enjoying the peace, my phone lit up with an unexpected call. It was Linda. I rolled my eyes but answered, curiosity getting the better of me. What do you want, Linda? We need to talk, she said, her voice unusually strained. About what? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. It's about Jack. He's not doing well, she admitted, her usual venom replaced by something that almost sounded like worry. I felt a pang of concern despite everything. What's going on? He's struggling to cope. He's lost without you, Linda said, her voice wavering. Please, Evelyn, can you just talk to him? I took a deep breath, considering my response. Linda, I've moved on. Jack needs to figure out his own life without me. You can't just abandon him after everything, she pleaded, a touch of desperation creeping in. I didn't abandon him. I left because it was the healthy choice for both of us. I said firmly, and frankly, he needs to stand on his own 2 feet. There was silence on the other end before she spoke again, a hard edge back in her voice. Fine, but don't think this is over, Evelyn. You'll see the consequences of your actions. I hung up, frustration bubbling up inside me, but I quickly let it go, refocusing on the day ahead. I had plans to explore the neighborhood, maybe find a coffee shop to work from. My new job opportunity was promising, and I wanted to embrace this fresh start fully. The day passed beautifully. I found a quaint little cafe just a few blocks away and spent hours there, immersing myself in new projects. My passion for graphic design felt reignited, the creativity and freedom flowing back to me. It was a reminder of what I'd fought for and won. Returning home in the evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. I was settling into this new chapter of my life, one where I called the shots. I cooked myself dinner, a simple but satisfying meal, and sat at my tiny kitchen table feeling content. Just as I was finishing up, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered with a hesitant, "Hello?" "Evelyn, it's Jack," his voice came through, sounding defeated. "Can we talk?" I hesitated but agreed. "Okay, Jack, what's on your mind?" "I'm sorry for everything," he started. "I realize now how much I relied on you, and it wasn't fair. I should have listened more, been more supportive." "Jack, I appreciate the apology," I said gently, "but we've made our decisions. We need to stick to them." "I know, I just needed to say it," he replied, a note of finality in his voice. Take care, Evelyn. You too, Jack, I said, ending the call and feeling a sense of closure. Just as I was about to relax for the night, there was a knock at my door. Surprised, I opened it to find Linda standing there, looking more haggard than I'd ever seen her. Linda, what are you doing here? I asked tiredly. Please, Evelyn, I'm desperate, she started, her voice cracking. Jack's in a bad place. I don't know what to do. You were always the strong one, the one who held things together. I sighed, feeling a tug of pity despite everything. Linda, I can't fix this for you. Jack needs to learn to cope on his own. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. I just don't know how to help him. I think the best thing you can do is support him without trying to control everything, I suggested. He needs space to find his way. Linda nodded slowly, a rare moment of vulnerability in her eyes. Maybe you're right. Take care, Linda, I said, gently closing the door. As I leaned back against it, the apartment around me felt more like home than ever. The future was mine, filled with endless possibilities, free from the chains that had once bound me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a profound sense of peace and hope. I laid in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling as Marcia's venomous words echoed through my mind. Abby, you're a useless, draining weight on this family. Max deserves better than a wife who wallows in bed all day. Her cruel remark cut deep, reopening wounds that never seemed to heal. I closed my eyes, trying to escape the harsh reality that had become my life, but the memories came flooding back, unbidden. It all started with that fateful day, the day my life changed forever. I had been working late at the art studio, lost in the creative flow that had once brought me such joy. As I left the building, the wheelchair ramp malfunctioned, sending me tumbling violently to the ground. The searing pain that followed would forever be seared into my memory. The doctors delivered the devastating news. I was paralyzed from the waist down, my dreams of being a successful artist crushed in an instant. Max had been supportive at first, but over time, the strain of caring for me took its toll on our marriage. His family never made any effort to hide their disdain towards me. Marcia, with her perpetual scowl and cutting remarks, made it clear that she saw me as nothing more than a burden. Hank, her husband, simply followed her lead, his silence just as damaging as her words. Even Jenna, Max's sister, couldn't resist taking jabs at me whenever the opportunity arose. Why bother getting up? Not like you can do anything useful from bed anyway, she would taunt, flipping through my sketches with a dismissive sneer. I tried to channel my pain into my artwork, pouring my emotions onto the canvas, but it was never enough. The constant barrage of negativity and resentment wore me down, day by day. Then the final blow came from the one person I thought would always stand by me. Max sat on the edge of our bed, his expression somber as he delivered the words that shattered my heart into a million pieces. I need someone who can support me, Abby. This isn't the life I wanted, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. In that moment, I knew that I had to leave. I couldn't stay in this toxic environment any longer, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a burden. It was time to take control of my life, to find the strength within myself that had been buried beneath years of emotional turmoil. As I packed my belongings, Carla, my kind and supportive housekeeper, offered a gentle smile. You're doing the right thing, Abby. It's time to start living for yourself. With a newfound determination, I left the house that had become a prison, embarking on a journey that would lead me to a life I never could have imagined. The devastating accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down replayed in my mind like a broken record. It was a sunny morning, and I was running late for work at the art studio. In my haste, I didn't notice the loose bolt on the wheelchair ramp until it was too late. As I descended, the ramp suddenly gave way, sending me tumbling violently to the ground. The searing pain that shot through my back was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I lay there, helpless and alone, praying for someone to find me. Hours seemed to pass before a coworker finally discovered me and called for an ambulance. The ride to the hospital was a blur, but the doctor's words were crystal clear. I'm sorry, Miss Miller, but the impact has caused severe damage to your spinal cord. You'll never walk again. Those words shattered my world. My dreams, my independence, my future, all gone in an instant. Max was by my side, his face etched with concern, but even then, I could sense the strain it was putting on our relationship. In the months that followed, I tried my best to adjust to my new reality. Max hired Carla, a kind and firm housekeeper, to help me with daily tasks. She was a godsend, always offering a gentle touch and a listening ear. "You're stronger than you think, Abby," she would say, her warm smile a beacon of hope in my darkest moments. But as time passed, the cracks in our once happy marriage began to show. Max's family, who had never been particularly fond of me, grew increasingly resentful. Marcia, my mother-in-law, made no effort to hide her disdain. "Look at her, just lying there like a useless lump," she would snarl, her words cutting deeper than any knife. Hank, her husband, would simply nod in agreement, his silence just as damaging as her venom. Even Jenna, Max's sister, couldn't resist taking jabs at me. "Why bother trying to draw? It's not like anyone would want to buy art from a cripple," she would sneer, tossing my sketchbook aside with a cruel laugh. Through it all, Carla remained my rock, my unwavering source of strength. "Don't let them break you, Abby," she would whisper, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. But as the resentment and bitterness grew, I found it harder and harder to hold on to hope. Max grew distant, consumed by his work and the pressure from his family. Our once loving relationship had become a mere shell, a constant reminder of all that I had lost. It was during one of our rare conversations that Max finally revealed the truth. "I can't do this anymore, Abby. I need a wife who can support me, not someone I have to take care of." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, but deep down, I knew he was right. Our marriage had become a prison, a constant struggle against the weight of his family's cruelty and my own limitations. As I watched him walk out the door, a newfound determination took root within me. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control how I responded. It was time to take back my life, to rise from the ashes of my shattered dreams and show the world, and Max's family, that I was more than just a burden. With Carla by my side, I began to plan my escape, my path to freedom and redemption. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, a hope that would soon burn brighter than any flame. After Max's departure, the hostility from his family escalated to new heights. Marcia, my bitter mother-in-law, seemed to take perverse pleasure in tormenting me at every opportunity. "What's the point in Max having a wife who can't even cook dinner?" she would snarl, her eyes filled with contempt as she glared at me from across the room. Hank, her husband, would simply sit in silence, his lack of defense cutting just as deep as Marcia's cruel words. Even Jenna, Max's sister, who had recently moved back in after her own marriage fell apart, couldn't resist piling on the abuse. "You're just a burden, Abby," she would sneer, tossing my sketchbook aside with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Why bother trying to draw when you'll never amount to anything?" Through it all, Carla remained my rock, her unwavering support and encouragement the only thing keeping me from slipping into despair. "Don't let them break you, Abby," she would whisper, her warm embrace a lifeline in the midst of the storm. "You're stronger than they'll ever be." And so I clung to my art, pouring my pain and frustration onto the canvas, creating vibrant worlds that offered a temporary escape from the harsh reality that surrounded me. But no matter how hard I tried, the constant barrage of negativity and resentment took its toll. I found it harder and harder to summon the creative spark that had once burned so brightly within me. One day, as I struggled to capture the image in my mind, Jenna sauntered into the room, her eyes narrowed with disdain. "What's the point of all this?" she sneered, gesturing dismissively at my work. "No one's ever going to buy art from a cripple." Her words cut like a knife, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. I hurled my paintbrush across the room, the splatters of color a vivid representation of the rage that coursed through my veins. "Get out," I growled, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Get out and don't come back until you've learned some basic human decency." Jenna's eyes widened in shock, but before she could respond, Carla appeared in the doorway, her expression one of steely determination. "You heard her," Carla said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "It's time for you to leave." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Carla was enough to silence her. With a huff of indignation, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Carla turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and pride. "You did the right thing, Abby. You don't deserve to be treated like that. I nodded, my hand still shaking from the confrontation. I can't live like this anymore, Carla. I need to get out of here, away from all of this toxicity. Carla's expression softened, and she reached out to squeeze my hand reassuringly. Then we'll find a way, she said, her voice filled with determination. You deserve to be happy, Abby, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you achieve that. As she spoke those words, I felt a glimmer of hope ignite within me, a hope that, for the first time in years, burned brighter than the darkness that had consumed me. It was time to take control of my life, to break free from the shackles of Max's family and their cruelty. And with Carla by my side, I knew that nothing was impossible. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, Jenna's return to the family home added fuel to the already raging fire of hostility. Fresh from her own failed marriage, she seemed determined to take out her bitterness and frustration on me. Well, if it isn't the useless cripple, she would sneer, her words dripping with venom as she sauntered into the room. Still moping around, I see. I tried to ignore her taunts, focusing instead on my artwork, the one thing that still brought me solace in the midst of the storm. But Jenna was relentless, her cruelty knowing no bounds. What's the point of all this? She would mock, flipping through my sketchbook with a dismissive flick of her wrist. No one's ever going to buy art from a pathetic waste of space like you. Carla, bless her soul, was always there to intervene, her fierce loyalty and unwavering support a constant source of strength. That's enough, Jenna, she would say, her voice firm but laced with compassion. Abby doesn't deserve to be treated like that. But Jenna was like a rabid dog, snapping and snarling at anyone who dared to challenge her. Stay out of this, Carla, she would snarl. This is family business. And then her gaze would turn back to me, her eyes filled with a twisted mixture of pity and disdain. Why bother getting up, Abby? Not like you can do anything useful from bed anyway. Those words cut deeper than any knife, reigniting the pain and despair that had become my constant companions. In those moments, it was all I could do to hold back the tears, to maintain the fragile facade of strength that had become my only defense. But Carla saw through it all, her keen eyes picking up on the subtle cracks in my armor. Don't listen to her, Abby, she would whisper, her warm embrace a lifeline in the midst of the storm. You're stronger than they'll ever be. And so, I clung to those words, using them as a shield against the constant barrage of cruelty and disdain. I poured my pain and frustration onto the canvas, creating vibrant worlds that offered a temporary escape from the harsh reality that surrounded me. But no matter how hard I tried, the weight of their words was suffocating, threatening to snuff out the last flickering embers of hope that burned within me. One day, as I sat in my room, trying to capture the image in my mind, Jenna barged in, her eyes narrowed with disdain. Still at it, I see, she sneered, her gaze sweeping over my work with a contemptuous sneer. You really are pathetic, you know that? Something inside me snapped, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. At least I'm not a bitter, miserable failure like you, I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. Jenna's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But then a cruel smile twisted her lips, and she let out a harsh laugh. You're right, Abby, she said, her voice dripping with venom. At least I'm not a useless cripple who's nothing but a burden on everyone around her. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving me to drown in the aftermath of her cruel words. As the tears streamed down my cheeks, Carla appeared in the doorway, her expression one of concern and sympathy. Don't listen to her, Abby, she said, her voice gentle but laced with steel. You're worth 1,000 of her. I nodded, too choked up to speak, and allowed Carla to pull me into a comforting embrace. In that moment, I knew that something had to change, that I couldn't go on living like this, surrounded by such cruelty and toxicity. It was time to take control of my life, to break free from the shackles of Max's family and their constant torment. And with Carla by my side, I knew that I had the strength to do it. The tension in the household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcia's disdain for me had only grown more palpable with Jenna's return, and even Hank, normally so passive, seemed to be emboldened by his daughter's cruelty. It all came to a head one evening when Max came to visit. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that seeing me might rekindle some of the love and compassion that had once been the foundation of our marriage. But as soon as he stepped through the door, I could see the change in his eyes. Gone was the warmth and affection I had grown so accustomed to, replaced by a cold, detached stare that chilled me to the bone. "Abby," he said, his voice flat and emotionless, "we need to talk." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest, as I followed him into the living room, where Marcia, Hank, and Jenna were already waiting, their expressions ranging from smug satisfaction to outright glee. Max took a deep breath, and then the words I had been dreading tumbled out. "I'm leaving you, Abby. I can't do this anymore." The room seemed to spin around me, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. But Max pressed on, his voice growing colder with each word. "I need someone who can support me, not someone I have to take care of. This isn't the life I wanted." Marcia let out a triumphant cackle, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Finally, he's come to his senses," she crowed. "You were never good enough for him, Abby, just a useless burden." Jenna nodded in agreement, her lips twisted into a cruel smirk. "Good riddance," she spat. "Maybe now Max can find a real woman, not some pathetic cripple." I opened my mouth to protest, to beg Max to reconsider, but the words died in my throat. What was the point? It was clear that his mind was made up, that he had been poisoned by the toxic influence of his family. Carla, bless her soul, tried to intervene, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you speak to her like that?" she snarled, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "Abby is 10 times the person any of you will ever be." But her words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the chorus of cruel laughter that echoed through the room. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The pain, the anguish, the endless torment, it all crystallized into a burning resolve, a determination to break free from this toxic cycle of abuse once and for all. I looked at Max, my heart hardening with each passing second. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "If that's how you really feel, then I'm leaving." Marcia's laughter died in her throat, her eyes widening in surprise. "What did you say?" she spluttered, her face flushing an ugly shade of red. But I was done cowering, done being the victim. "You heard me," I said, my voice ringing with newfound strength. "I'm leaving this poisonous environment, and I'm never coming back." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a sharp glare. "Save it," I snapped. "I'm done listening to your pathetic attempts at tearing me down. I'm stronger than all of you combined, and it's time I started living my life on my own terms." With that, I turned and wheeled myself out of the room, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Carla fell into step beside me, her eyes shining with pride and admiration. "I've never been more proud of you, Abby," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're finally free." And as we left that toxic house behind, I knew that she was right. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. I was free, and nothing, not Max, not Marcia, not anyone, was ever going to hold me back again. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as Carla and I pulled up to the lakeside cabin I had inherited from my parents. It was a rustic yet cozy retreat nestled among towering pines and overlooking a pristine body of water that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. As I wheeled myself onto the porch, taking in the breathtaking scenery, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying until that moment. "Welcome home, Abby," Carla said, her voice warm and filled with pride. "This is where you're meant to be." And she was right. From the moment we stepped inside, I knew that this place, this haven, was exactly what I needed to start my new life, to finally break free from the shackles of Max's toxic family and their endless cruelty. The cabin was a blank canvas, just waiting for me to make it my own. And with Carla's help, that's exactly what we did. We transformed the spacious living area into a stunning studio, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light and offered breathtaking views of the lake. Carla helped me set up my easels and organize my supplies, her keen eye for detail ensuring that every aspect of the space was perfectly tailored to my needs. "This is your domain, Abby," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "A place where you can create without limits, without anyone holding you back." And create I did. With each stroke of my brush, I poured my heart and soul onto the canvas, channeling the pain and anguish of my past into vibrant, emotive pieces that seemed to come alive before my very eyes. Carla was my constant companion, offering encouragement and support every step of the way. "Your talent is inspiring, Abby," she would say, her eyes filled with admiration. "The world needs to see it." And so, with her help, I began to build my portfolio, showcasing my work online and in local galleries. At first, the response was modest, but as word of my talent spread, the commissions began to pour in. Before long, I was able to support myself entirely through my art, a feat I had once thought impossible. But more than just financial independence, my success brought with it a sense of empowerment and validation that I had been sorely lacking in my life. No longer was I the useless burden that Max's family had so cruelly labeled me. I was a thriving artist, a woman in control of her own destiny, and nothing, not their cruelty, not their disdain, could ever take that away from me. As the months passed, I found myself growing stronger, more confident, and more sure of myself than I had ever been before. The peaceful surroundings of the cabin, coupled with Carla's unwavering support, had become a sanctuary, a place where I could heal, both physically and emotionally. And yet, even as I basked in my newfound freedom and success, a part of me couldn't help but wonder about the family I had left behind. What had become of Max and his toxic brood? Had they continued to wallow in their own bitterness and resentment, or had my departure forced them to confront the ugliness of their actions? I tried not to dwell on those thoughts, focusing instead on the present and the bright future that stretched out before me. But deep down, I knew that one day I would have to face them again, if not for my own sake, then for the sake of the countless others who had suffered at their hands. And when that day came, I vowed to be ready, my newfound strength and resilience a shield against their cruelty and a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt the sting of their malice. For now, though, I was content to simply revel in my newfound independence, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of Carla's friendship. This was my life now, and no one, not Max, not Marcia, not anyone, was ever going to take that away from me again. Life at the lakeside cabin was everything I had dreamed of and more. The peace and tranquility of the surroundings provided the perfect backdrop for my art, and with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident, and more in control of my own destiny. Carla was a constant source of support and encouragement, her unwavering belief in me fueling my determination to succeed. Together, we had created a haven, a place where I could thrive, free from the toxic influence of Max's family and their endless cruelty. But even as I basked in my newfound independence, the ghosts of my past refused to stay buried. It started with a phone call, the shrill ring shattering the peaceful silence of the cabin like a bolt of lightning. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my heart sink. It was Marcia, no doubt calling to unleash another torrent of abuse and vitriol. Without a second thought, I let it go to voicemail, refusing to let her poison seep back into my life. But the calls kept coming, day after day, week after week, each one more insistent than the last. And with each unanswered ring, I could feel the weight of my past growing heavier, threatening to drag me back into the darkness I had fought so hard to escape. Finally, one day, as the phone rang for what felt like the 100th time, something inside me snapped. With a trembling hand, I answered, bracing myself for the onslaught of hatred that was sure to follow. But the voice on the other end was not what I expected. "Abby?" Marcia's voice was strained, almost pleading. "Please, we need your help." I felt a surge of anger rise within me, but before I could respond, she continued, "Max, he's made a mess of everything. The business is failing. We're drowning in debt. And I'm sick, Abby, really sick." There was a pause, and for a moment I thought she had hung up. But then her voice came through again, barely above a whisper. "We were wrong, Abby. So wrong. Please, come back. We need you." The line went dead, and I was left staring at the phone, my mind racing with 1,000 different emotions. Part of me wanted to laugh, to revel in the sweet taste of revenge, to let them suffer as they had made me suffer for so long. But another part of me, the part that had once loved Max, that had seen the good in his family despite their flaws, couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Carla must have sensed my turmoil, because she appeared at my side, her eyes filled with concern. "What is it, Abby?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath and told her everything, laying bare the raw emotions that Marcia's words had stirred within me. To her credit, Carla didn't judge or dismiss my feelings. Instead, she simply listened, offering a shoulder to lean on and a sympathetic ear. "You've come so far, Abby," she said when I had finished. "Don't let them drag you back into that darkness." Her words resonated deep within me, reminding me of the strength and resilience I had cultivated over these past few months. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman they had once known. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I wasn't about to let their toxic influence poison my newfound happiness. But even as I resolved to push them from my mind, a part of me couldn't help but wonder what had transpired to bring them to such a desperate state. Had Max's ambition finally caught up with him? Had Jenna's bitterness consumed her from within? And what of Marcia's cryptic confession? What illness could have possibly humbled her so? Against my better judgment, I found myself growing curious, a morbid fascination taking root in the depths of my mind. Perhaps it was time to face them one last time, to confront the demons of my past and lay them to rest once and for all. Perhaps in doing so, I could finally find the closure I had been seeking all along. With a newfound resolve, I turned to Carla, my eyes alight with determination. "Book me a flight," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "It's time I paid Max and his family a visit." The familiar streets of my hometown felt like a foreign land as Carla and I made our way to Max's family home. So much had changed since I had last been here. I had changed, grown stronger and more resilient in the face of their cruelty. As we pulled up to the house, a sense of trepidation washed over me. What would I find on the other side of that door? Had they truly hit rock bottom, or was this all just another twisted game, another attempt to tear me down? Carla must have sensed my hesitation because she reached over and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "You've got this, Abby," she said, her voice filled with unwavering confidence. "Remember who you are and what you've overcome." With a deep breath, I steeled my resolve and wheeled myself up to the front door. Before I could even knock, it swung open, revealing a sight that nearly took my breath away. Marcia stood before me, her once immaculate appearance, now disheveled and unkempt. Her eyes were sunken, her skin sallow, and she seemed to have aged a decade in the short time since I had last seen her. "Abby," she croaked, her voice little more than a raspy whisper. "You came." I nodded, struggling to keep my composure in the face of her haggard appearance. "I came," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. She stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter, and as I wheeled myself into the familiar living room, I was struck by the state of disrepair that had befallen the once pristine home. Piles of unopened mail and overflowing ashtrays littered every surface, and the air was thick with the stale scent of despair. And then, there they were, Max, Jenna, and Hank, huddled together on the tattered sofa like a pack of wounded animals. They looked up as I entered, their eyes a mixture of shame and relief. "Abby," Max breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say." I held up a hand, silencing him before he could continue. "Save it," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength and confidence. "I'm not here for your apologies or your excuses. I'm here to set the record straight, once and for all." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Carla was enough to silence her. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that the tables had well and truly turned. "For years you treated me like a burden, like I was nothing more than a useless cripple," I continued, my gaze sweeping over each of them in turn. "You mocked me, belittled me, and tried to break me down at every turn." Marcia flinched, her eyes downcast, but I pressed on, the words tumbling from my lips like a dam bursting. "But you failed. You failed because you underestimated my strength, my resilience, and my determination to rise above your cruelty." I gestured to the disheveled state of the room, the tangible evidence of their downfall. "Look around you. This is what happens when you let bitterness and resentment consume you. This is the price you pay for treating others with such callous disregard." Max opened his mouth, but I cut him off with a sharp shake of my head. "No, Max, it's my turn to speak now." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the final blow. "While you were busy tearing me down, I was building something for myself. A life, a career, a future, all things you said I could never have." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick portfolio filled with samples of my work and glowing reviews from critics and collectors alike. "This is what you mocked me for," I said, tossing the portfolio onto the coffee table with a resounding thud. "This is the useless art that you said no one would ever want." Jenna's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, her mouth hanging open in a silent gasp of disbelief. "But you were wrong," I continued, my voice rising with each word. "You were all wrong about me, and now the world knows the truth, that I am a survivor, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with." I wheeled myself closer until I was mere inches from where they sat, huddled together like frightened children. "You called me a burden, but look at you now, crumbling under your own weight. I'm stronger without you, stronger than I've ever been, and that's something you'll never be able to take away from me." With those final words, I turned and made my way towards the door, Carla beaming with pride at my side. As we stepped out into the crisp evening air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the weight of their hatred, their cruelty, and their toxic influence. I was free, truly free, and nothing they could say or do would ever change that. In that moment, I knew that I had won, not just the battle but the war, and as we drove away, leaving their shattered lives behind, I couldn't help but smile. Revenge, it seemed, was indeed a dish best served cold. The monotony of the office cubicle was suffocating. I stared blankly at the spreadsheet on my computer, trying to muster the energy to care about the numbers dancing across the screen. Just another day, another grueling marathon of data entry and analysis. "Earth to Jessa," Marie's voice jarred me from my trance. My best friend leaned against the cubicle wall, her vibrant red hair and infectious smile a stark contrast to the drab office surroundings. "Hey, Marie," I replied, plastering on a half-hearted grin. "What's up? What's up?" She scoffed playfully. "Girl, you've been cooped up in this place for way too long. If you don't come out with us this weekend, I swear I'll drag you out myself." I sighed, knowing full well that Marie's threats were never idle. "Come on, you know I have this big project at work. The numbers won't crunch themselves." Marie rolled her eyes dramatically. "Work can wait. This is about living a little. Plus, I've heard there's someone you need to meet." My curiosity piqued despite my initial reluctance. Marie had a knack for sniffing out potential romantic interests, and her matchmaking skills were legendary. All right, you win. I'll come out this weekend." Her face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "That's my girl. Trust me, Jess. This one's going to be special." Little did I know how prophetic those words would prove to be. The weekend arrived, and Marie whisked me away to a local lake where our group of friends had rented boats for the day. As I stepped onto the dock, the warm sun kissed my skin, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of freedom. For a few precious hours, I allowed myself to shed the shackles of my routine and simply exist in the moment. It was during one of our breaks, as we lounged on the grassy shore, that Marie nudged me gently. "There he is," she whispered, nodding towards a tall, broad-shouldered man approaching our group. My breath caught in my throat as our eyes met. His smile was disarming, his gaze intense yet inviting. "So you're the esteemed accountant, Jessa?" he said, his voice rich and melodic. Suddenly self-conscious, I tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "Yep, crunching numbers by day, trying to avoid too much excitement by night." He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Well, we can't have that, can we? I'm Ethan, and I insist you join us for a bonfire at my cabin later. It's time you embraced a little adventure." As our eyes locked once more, I knew my life was about to change forever. Ethan's invitation sparked a flame within me, igniting a desire for adventure that had long been dormant. As our group gathered around the crackling bonfire at his cabin later that evening, I found myself drawn to him like a moth to a brilliant flame. The way he commanded the attention of those around him was mesmerizing. He regaled us with tales of his travels, his voice rich and captivating, painting vivid pictures in our minds, and whenever his gaze met mine, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass between us. "So, Jessa," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, "what's a brilliant accountant like yourself doing wasting away in some stuffy office?" I felt my cheeks flush at his compliment. "It pays the bills." I replied with a shrug, trying to play it cool. Not exactly the most exciting career path, but someone has to keep the numbers in line. He shook his head, a playful grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. That's a tragedy. A mind like yours deserves to be challenged, to be pushed to its limits. Have you ever considered working for a company that truly values your talents? Before I could respond, Marie nudged me with her elbow, wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. I shot her a warning glance, but the damage was done. Ethan had piqued my curiosity. As the night wore on and the fire dwindled to embers, our group slowly dispersed, leaving Ethan and me alone in the flickering glow. We talked for hours about our hopes, our dreams, our fears. It was as if we had known each other for a lifetime, our connection transcending the boundaries of time and space. When the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, I knew my life would never be the same. Ethan had awakened something within me, a hunger for more than just the mundane existence I had grown accustomed to. Over the next few weeks, our bond deepened with each stolen moment we shared. Ethan was like a whirlwind, sweeping me off my feet and carrying me to heights I had never dared to dream of. His charm was intoxicating, his confidence contagious. And then, one fateful evening, as we strolled hand in hand through a moonlit park, he stopped and turned to face me, his eyes shining with an intensity that stole my breath away. "Jessa," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've known you forever. It's almost unsettling how easy it is to talk to you, to be myself around you." My heart pounded in my chest as I gazed up at him, lost in the depths of his eyes. "I know the feeling," I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. "It's like we're picking up a conversation from another lifetime." And with those words, he pulled me close, his lips crashing against mine in a kiss that set my very soul ablaze. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, my life would never be the same. Little did I know just how true those words would prove to be. From that fateful night in the park, my relationship with Ethan progressed at a dizzying pace. It was as if we were making up for lost time, desperate to cram a lifetime of moments into every fleeting second we spent together. He showered me with affection and attention, sweeping me off my feet with grand gestures and whispered promises. And I, foolish and blinded by the intensity of my feelings, surrendered myself completely to the whirlwind romance. It wasn't long before Ethan insisted on introducing me to his family, a prospect that filled me with equal parts excitement and trepidation. I had never been one to crave the spotlight, and the thought of meeting the people who had shaped the man I loved filled me with a nervous energy. "Don't worry, darling," Ethan soothed, sensing my apprehension. "My mother can be a bit intense, but she'll adore you once she gets to know you." I should have heeded the warning in his words, but love had blinded me to the potential dangers that lay ahead. The day of our first family dinner arrived, and I found myself standing on the doorstep of Ethan's childhood home, a sprawling estate that spoke of wealth and prestige. As the heavy oak door swung open, I was greeted by a woman whose steely gaze and pinched expression immediately set me on edge. "So you're the one Ethan's been raving about," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I can't say I'm impressed." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Margaret," she snapped, her eyes narrowing, "and you would do well to remember that." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared, his warm smile a stark contrast to his mother's icy demeanor. "Mother, please," he chided gently. "Jessa is our guest. Let's not scare her off just yet." Margaret huffed but stepped aside to allow us entry. As we made our way into the opulent dining room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into the lion's den, and the predator was circling. Dinner was a tense affair, punctuated by Margaret's pointed barbs and veiled insults. Ethan tried his best to deflect her attacks, but it was clear that his mother held a deep-seated disdain for me, a disdain that only seemed to grow as the evening wore on. "So, Jessa," Margaret drawled, swirling her wine-glass with a practiced air of nonchalance, "what exactly are your intentions with my son?" I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," I stammered. Margaret's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly well. A girl from your background snaring the heir to the family fortune? Forgive me if I'm a little skeptical of your motives." The words stung like a physical blow, and I felt the heat of humiliation rising in my cheeks. Before I could formulate a response, Ethan intervened. "That's enough, Mother," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Jessa is the woman I love, and you will treat her with respect. If you can't do that, then we're leaving." Margaret's eyes flashed with fury, but she said nothing more. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence, and as Ethan and I made our way back to his car, I couldn't shake the feeling that a battle line had been drawn. Little did I know, it was merely the opening salvo in a war that would soon consume us all. Despite Margaret's blatant hostility, Ethan remained resolute in his love for me. He insisted that his mother would eventually come around, that her sharp tongue was merely a defense mechanism against the threat of change. "She's been through a lot," he explained one evening as we lay tangled in each other's arms. "My father's death hit her hard, and she's never really recovered from it. But deep down, she's a good person. She just needs time to see that you're not a threat." I wanted to believe him, but the memory of Margaret's cutting words still stung like an open wound. Still, I clung to the hope that Ethan was right, that his mother's icy exterior would eventually thaw. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I grew even closer, our bond strengthened by the shared adversity we faced. He showered me with affection and attention, as if trying to make up for his mother's disdain with an overabundance of love. It was during this time that he broached the subject of me joining the family business, a multinational corporation that had been in the Ethan's family for generations. At first, I was hesitant, unsure of my ability to navigate the treacherous waters of such a high-stakes enterprise. "Nonsense," Ethan scoffed, his eyes alight with confidence. "You're the most brilliant woman I know. With your talent for numbers and your keen mind, you'll be an asset to the company." Against my better judgment, I allowed myself to be swayed by his flattery and my own desire to prove myself worthy in Margaret's eyes. Little did I know that by accepting Ethan's offer, I was walking straight into the lion's den, with no idea of the dangers that lurked within. My first day at the office was a whirlwind of introductions and orientation sessions, but one encounter stood out like a beacon in the fog. As I was being shown to my new workspace, a stunning woman with raven hair and piercing green eyes strode past, her gaze lingering on me for a fraction of a second too long. "That's Vanessa," my guide whispered, his voice tinged with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "She's the new hotshot executive Margaret brought in from overseas. Word is, she's a real shark in the boardroom." I brushed off the warning, too caught up in the excitement of my new position to pay much heed to office gossip. Little did I know that Vanessa would soon become the catalyst for a chain of events that would threaten to tear my world apart. As the weeks turned into months, I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my worth to Margaret and earn her grudging respect. But no matter how hard I toiled, no matter how many late nights I spent poring over spreadsheets and financial reports, her disdain for me never wavered. "This isn't some backyard budget you're playing with," she would snap, her eyes narrowed in contempt. "This is our legacy, and I won't have some upstart accountant jeopardizing everything my family has built." Her words stung, but I refused to let them deter me. I was convinced that if I could just prove my value to the company, Margaret would eventually see me as more than just a gold-digging interloper. Little did I know that Vanessa's presence was about to throw a wrench into my carefully laid plans. As the months rolled by, I found myself increasingly entangled in the web of office politics and power struggles that seemed to permeate every corner of the company. Margaret's disdain for me only grew more palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was actively working against me, undermining my efforts at every turn. It was during this tumultuous time that Vanessa began to make her presence felt. At first, it was subtle, a lingering glance in the hallway, a casual brush of the arm as we passed each other in the break room, but soon her behavior became more brazen, more overt. "Jessa, darling," she would purr, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Have you had a chance to review those quarterly projections I sent over? I'd love to get your thoughts." Caught off guard by her sudden familiarity, I would stumble through a response, my cheeks flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and confusion. Vanessa seemed to revel in my discomfort, her emerald eyes sparkling with a predatory gleam. As the weeks wore on, her advances grew bolder, her touches more lingering, her innuendos more thinly veiled. And all the while, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was toying with me, playing some twisted game whose rules I couldn't begin to fathom. Ethan, bless his heart, remained oblivious to the rising tension between Vanessa and me. Whenever I tried to broach the subject, he would wave it off with a dismissive chuckle. "You're imagining things, darling," he would say, pulling me close and planting a kiss on my forehead. "Vanessa's just a bit intense. It's all part of her charm." But I knew better. There was nothing charming about the way Vanessa's gaze would linger on Ethan whenever we were together, her eyes raking over his form with barely disguised hunger. It was a look I had seen before, a look that spoke of desire and ambition, a dangerous combination. Still, I tried to push my misgivings aside, convincing myself that I was simply being paranoid. Ethan loved me, and that was all that mattered. Or so I thought. It all came to a head one fateful evening when Ethan and I were working late at the office, poring over financial reports in preparation for an upcoming board meeting. We were the only ones left in the building, or so I thought. As I stepped out of Ethan's office to use the restroom, I heard a sound that stopped me dead in my tracks. The unmistakable sound of muffled laughter, followed by a low, throaty moan. My heart pounding in my chest, I crept down the hallway, following the sounds until I reached the door of an empty conference room. And there, through the sliver of space between the door and the frame, I saw a sight that shattered my world into a million pieces. Ethan, my Ethan, the man I loved with every fiber of my being, locked in a passionate embrace with Vanessa, their bodies intertwined in a dance of lust and betrayal. As the realization of what I was witnessing crashed over me like a tidal wave, I felt the air being sucked from my lungs, the ground shifting beneath my feet. In that moment, everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, crumbled to dust. And as the tears streamed down my face, a newfound fire ignited within me, a fire fueled by rage, hurt, and a burning desire for revenge. The days and weeks following my devastating discovery passed in a blur of anguish and disbelief. I tried to confront Ethan about what I had witnessed, but he brushed off my concerns with a wave of his hand and a reassuring smile that no longer held any warmth. "You're imagining things, Jessa," he would say, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's just work stress getting to you. You know how Vanessa can be, all that intensity and ambition. It's nothing to worry about." But I knew better. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and no amount of placating words or empty promises could erase the image of Ethan and Vanessa's betrayal from my mind. As the tension between us mounted, Ethan grew more distant, spending longer hours at the office and finding excuses to avoid me. And all the while, Vanessa prowled the hallways like a lioness on the hunt, her every glance and gesture a silent taunt, a reminder of the secret she held over me. It was during one of these increasingly rare evenings together that I finally found the courage to confront Ethan head-on. We were sitting in tense silence, the weight of our unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air, when I finally broke. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "I've noticed you've been distant lately. Is something going on?" He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, refusing to meet my gaze. "You're imagining things. It's just work stress." The familiar refrain, the same dismissive tone that had become his default response whenever I dared to broach the subject of his infidelity. Something inside me snapped, and before I could stop myself, the words came tumbling out in a torrent of pent-up emotion. "Don't lie to me, Ethan. I know about you and Vanessa. I saw you together in the conference room that night. I saw everything." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock and panic. For a moment, he looked like a cornered animal, trapped and desperate for an escape route. But then, as the realization of his exposed betrayal sank in, his expression hardened, and a cruel sneer twisted his once handsome features. "So, you finally found out," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you to confront me, but I suppose even a mousy little thing like you has a breaking point." The insult stung, but I refused to let him see how deeply his words had cut me. Instead, I steeled myself, drawing upon the reserves of strength I didn't even know I possessed. "How could you do this to me, Ethan?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "After everything we've been through, after all the promises you made?" He let out a harsh bark of laughter, his eyes cold and devoid of any trace of the love I had once seen in them. Promises? He spat. Don't be so naive, Jessa. This was never about love or promises. It was about power and control, and you were just a means to an end. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs. All this time, I had been nothing more than a pawn in Ethan's twisted game, a disposable piece to be sacrificed when the time was right. But even as the sting of his betrayal threatened to consume me, a new emotion began to take root, a burning, all-consuming fury that set my very soul ablaze. If Ethan thought he could discard me so easily, he was sorely mistaken. I would make him pay for his sins, for the pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me. And as I looked into his cold, heartless eyes, I knew that this was only the beginning. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready for war. The aftermath of Ethan's confession was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. As the harsh reality of his deceit sank in, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for vengeance, a desire that threatened to overshadow every other aspect of my life. Ethan, for his part, seemed utterly unfazed by the emotional maelstrom he had unleashed. With a callousness that chilled me to the bone, he delivered the final blow, the words that would forever shatter the illusion of the life we had built together. "Vanessa's pregnant," he said, his voice devoid of any trace of remorse, "and I want a divorce." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. Pregnant? Divorce? How could this be happening? How could the man I had loved with every fiber of my being be so cruel, so heartless? Before I could formulate a response, the sound of footsteps in the hallway heralded the arrival of a familiar figure. Margaret, her face a mask of fury and disgust. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her piercing gaze boring into Ethan with a mixture of rage and disappointment. Ethan met her stare with a defiant glare, his jaw set in a hard line. "I'm leaving Jessa," he said, his voice tinged with a note of finality. "Vanessa is carrying my child, and I want to be with her." Margaret's eyes widened in shock, her lips parting in a silent gasp of disbelief. For a moment, she looked as though she might crumple to the floor, the weight of Ethan's betrayal too much to bear. But then, something seemed to shift within her, a steely resolve hardening her features. She turned her gaze towards me, and for the first time I saw something other than disdain in her eyes. A flicker of respect, perhaps even empathy. "This is unthinkable," she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You have shamed this family, Ethan. You are no longer welcome in this company or in our lives." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "You can't do this, Mother. This is my company, my legacy." "Your legacy?" Margaret spat, her words dripping with contempt. "You have squandered your legacy, boy. You have thrown it all away for a fleeting dalliance with that woman." Her gaze flickered towards me, and for a brief moment I saw something akin to regret in her eyes. "I never wanted this, Jessa," she said, her voice softening ever so slightly. "But he has left me no choice. We do what must be done." And just like that, a fragile alliance was forged, an unlikely partnership born from the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak. Margaret and I, two women united by a common enemy and a burning desire for justice. As Ethan stormed out of the room, his parting words a bitter promise of retaliation, I felt a newfound sense of purpose coursing through my veins. The battle had been joined, and I was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Little did I know that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and deception, a twisted labyrinth of lies and manipulation that would test the very limits of my resolve. But in that moment, fueled by the fire of Margaret's righteous fury and my own thirst for vengeance, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war had begun, and I would stop at nothing to ensure that Ethan and Vanessa paid for their sins. In the days and weeks that followed Ethan's explosive confession, Margaret and I forged an unlikely alliance, bound by our shared desire for vengeance against those who had wronged us. Despite our rocky history, we found common ground in our anger and determination to see justice served. "You underestimated me, Ethan," I spat, my voice dripping with venom as Margaret and I sat huddled in her opulent office, plotting our next move. "That was your first mistake." Margaret's lips curved into a grim smile, her eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. "And mine," she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. I never wanted this, Jessa. But he left me no choice. We do what must be done. And so we hatched our plan, a meticulously choreographed dance of deception and manipulation designed to dismantle Ethan's world piece by piece. First, we would strike at the heart of his newfound happiness, Vanessa. With Margaret's resources and my insider knowledge of the company's inner workings, we began to unravel the tangled web of lies and deceit that Vanessa had spun. Slowly but surely, we exposed her true nature. A calculating, manipulative viper who had sunk her fangs into Ethan, poisoning his mind and heart with her toxic ambition. One by one, we revealed her misdeeds to the board, her illicit affairs and underhanded dealings laid bare for all to see. And as the truth came to light, the whispers and sidelong glances began, until Vanessa found herself ostracized and reviled by those she had once sought to impress. "Please, Jessa," she begged, cornering me in the hallway one day, her once flawless facade crumbling under the weight of her exposed duplicity. "You have to help me. I'm carrying Ethan's child." I met her pleading gaze with a cold, impassive stare, reveling in the sweet taste of her desperation. "You brought this on yourself, Vanessa," I said, my voice devoid of any trace of sympathy. "You made your bed, now lie in it." With Vanessa's downfall, the first domino had fallen, and Ethan's world began to unravel at the seams. Stripped of his position and his power, he found himself adrift, a once mighty titan reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. And through it all, Margaret stood by my side, her steely resolve never wavering, even as the weight of her own guilt threatened to consume her. "I never wanted this for him," she confessed one evening, her voice barely above a whisper as we sipped glasses of expensive scotch in the dimly lit confines of her study. "He was my son, my flesh and blood, but he left me no choice." I reached across the table, placing my hand atop hers in a rare moment of shared vulnerability. "He made his choices, Margaret," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Now he has to live with the consequences." As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, Margaret extended an unexpected olive branch, an offer to take the reins of the company, to lead it into a new era of prosperity and redemption. "You've proven your worth, Jessa," she said, her eyes shining with a newfound respect. "You might as well make it official." And as I looked into her eyes, I saw not just the hard-won victory of our shared vendetta, but the promise of a new beginning, a chance to rise from the ashes of betrayal and forge a path of my own making. With a steadying breath, I accepted her offer, knowing that the road ahead would be paved with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that, perhaps, the darkest chapters of my life were finally behind me. Little did I know that the true test of my resilience was yet to come. I stared at Ethan, the new guy from Blue Peak Consulting, his charming smile already irking me. "Riley, so, you're the new golden boy from Blue Peak?" He chuckled, unfazed. "Something like that. And you are?" "The person who's going to make sure you don't mess everything up." I shot back, my tone clipped. Dovetail Solutions prided itself on its family-like atmosphere, but with our recent merger with Blue Peak, I knew there'd be friction. Ethan's breezy confidence set my teeth on edge. This place was my home turf. Over the next few months, Ethan and I worked closely on several high-stakes projects. His broad, innovative ideas often clashed with my meticulous, detail-oriented approach. Heated discussions turned into long nights poring over reports, fueled by greasy takeout and shared stories of our upbringings. Gradually, begrudging respect seeped in. Ethan's charisma was undeniable, and I found myself drawn to his relentless optimism. Our professional partnership evolved into something deeper, a bond forged through the trenches of corporate warfare. 2 years later, we married in a small, intimate ceremony. As my career soared and I became a senior director, Ethan remained a manager. Tension simmered beneath the surface. "People see me, and they see your husband. Not Ethan the manager, just Mr. Riley." He grumbled one night over takeout containers littering our living room. I squeezed his hand, trying to reassure him. "This is our success, Ethan. We're a team, remember?" But cracks were already forming in our once unshakable partnership. I should have seen the signs earlier, but I was too blinded by Ethan's charm. The late nights at the office took a toll, not just on our workload, but on our relationship. We grew closer, sharing stories over greasy burgers and fries, laughing at inside jokes no one else understood. "You know, you're not so bad, Riley," Ethan said one night. His tie loosened as we pored over financial projections. "For someone so uptight, that is." I rolled my eyes, trying to hide my smile. "And you're not as insufferable as I thought." That was our dynamic, constant back and forth, challenging each other at every turn. But there was an undeniable chemistry, a spark that kept us going late into the night, but fueled by ambition and maybe something more. It wasn't until our first major account review that the cracks began to show. Ethan stumbled through his portion of the presentation, glossing over crucial details I'd drilled into him. "If I may," I interjected smoothly, "our strategy also includes adaptive risk management and real-time analytics to mitigate—" "You just can't resist taking over, can you?" Ethan snapped, his cheeks flushed. I recoiled, stunned by his outburst in front of the client. But I powered through, deftly addressing their concerns while subtly undermining Ethan's credibility. After that day, something shifted between us. The late nights grew tenser, our banter edgier. I started noticing little things, assignments being reassigned without my knowledge, my performance metrics dipping inexplicably. "Ethan, why is our workload so uneven lately?" I asked one evening as we worked late, yet again. "It's like you're offloading everything onto me." He shrugged, not meeting my gaze. "We're a team, right? What's mine is yours." But I knew there was more to it, so I started digging, combing through reports and client feedback. And what I found made my blood run cold. A systematic pattern of my top clients being redirected to Ethan's accounts. The evidence was damning: emails with my forged signature, spreadsheets manipulated to boost his numbers at my expense. I confronted him, anger and hurt swirling within me. "Explain this," I demanded, slamming the stack of documents on his desk. "Why are my clients suddenly being assigned to your team without my consent?" Ethan's face paled, but he quickly regained his composure. "You're imagining things, Riley. Maybe you just can't keep up." His words cut deep, but I was done playing games. I gathered every shred of proof, determined to expose his deceit once and for all. If Ethan wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure he paid the price. Despite the mounting evidence of Ethan's betrayal, I tried to salvage our relationship. Maybe it was denial or foolish hope that the man I'd fallen for was still in there somewhere. But I refused to give up without a fight. We went to counseling, where I laid everything out: the forged documents, the reassigned clients, the plummeting metrics. Ethan admitted to feeling overshadowed by my success, but swore it was a momentary lapse in judgment. "I'm so sorry, Riley," he said, his eyes brimming with tears. "You have to believe me. It'll never happen again." Against my better judgment, I wanted to trust him. We renewed our vows in a small ceremony, promising to rebuild our partnership on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. For a while, things seemed better. Ethan was present, attentive, and his performance improved. I started to let my guard down, allowing myself to hope we'd make it through this storm stronger than ever. Then the unthinkable happened. I was passed over for a senior director role I'd been grooming for. Instead, the position went to Ethan, who was promoted to VP of Operations. How could they do this? I ranted to my best friend Lila over glasses of wine. After everything Ethan pulled, he gets rewarded? Lila squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Rye, but you know this place. Connections mean everything. Ethan probably just has the right allies." I wanted to believe it was just corporate politics at play. But deep down, I knew the truth. Ethan had sabotaged me again, this time more thoroughly than ever. The final straw came during a make-or-break presentation for a lucrative international client. I'd prepped Ethan extensively, drilling him on every possible scenario. But when the tough questions came, he faltered, stumbling over basic details. "If I may," I interjected smoothly, shooting him a pointed look, "our adaptive analytics platform is designed to provide real-time insights, mitigating risks, and—" "Enough, Riley," Ethan exploded, his face flushed with rage. "I've got this." But it was clear to everyone in that room that he didn't. The client rep, Jessica Marshall, leveled a withering gaze at him. "Mr. Bennett, it seems you're struggling with the fundamentals here. Perhaps we should reconvene when you're better prepared." As they filed out, Ethan turned on me, his eyes blazing with fury. "Happy now? You just couldn't let me have this one moment, could you?" I met his glare, my own anger simmering. "You brought this on yourself, Ethan. I tried to help you, but you were too arrogant and insecure to listen." His face contorted with rage, and for a split second, I wondered if he might strike me. But he just shook his head in disgust and stormed out, leaving me alone to clean up his mess once again. After the disastrous presentation, things only got worse between Ethan and me. We could barely be in the same room without tensions flaring. What little remained of our marriage had withered, poisoned by resentment and mistrust. But I refused to back down at work. I poured myself into my projects, determined to prove my worth and reclaim the success Ethan had tried to steal from me. Late nights at the office became the norm as I immersed myself in analytics reports and client strategy sessions. Lila noticed the strain immediately. "Ree, you look like hell. When's the last time you got a decent night's sleep?" I waved her off, chugging another venti latte. "I'm fine, just working hard to get back on track." Her brow furrowed with concern. "Is this about Ethan's promotion? Because you know that was a total sham, right?" I forced a tight smile. "Don't worry about me. I've got this under control." But I didn't have it under control. Not at all. No matter how hard I worked, how many extra hours I put in, my performance metrics kept plummeting. Crucial clients and high-profile projects were being systematically reassigned to Ethan's team without my knowledge. One night, as I burned the midnight oil updating financial models, an email notification pinged on my laptop. It was from HR, approving the transfer of the Zephyr Technologies account, one of my biggest clients, to Ethan's portfolio. White-hot fury coursed through me as I realized the truth. Ethan was undermining me again, sabotaging my career in his relentless pursuit of success. This time, he wasn't just forging documents, he was manipulating the entire system. I stormed into his office, slamming the damning email printout on his desk. "Care to explain this?" I seethed, struggling to keep my voice steady. Ethan had the audacity to feign innocence. "Explain what? It's just a routine account transfer, Riley. No need to overreact." "Don't play dumb with me," I exploded. "You've been systematically stripping me of my clients and workload to make yourself look good." Just like before. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw the ugly truth in his eyes. The bitterness, the resentment, the twisted sense of entitlement that drove his actions. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by that smarmy grin I'd once found charming. "You're just paranoid, babe. Maybe if you pulled your weight a little more, you wouldn't feel so threatened." His words hit like a physical blow, leaving me reeling. How could the man I'd loved, the partner I'd built a life with, treat me with such callous cruelty? I wanted to scream, to hurl every vile insult I could muster. But I knew that would only give him more ammunition. So, with a Herculean effort, I reined in my fury and met his gaze with steely resolve. "This isn't over, Ethan. Not by a long shot." Turning on my heel, I stormed out, my mind already whirring with how to expose his deceit once and for all. He wanted to play dirty? Fine, I'd make sure he paid the ultimate price. With Ethan's betrayal laid bare, I knew I had to act quickly before he buried me completely. I gathered every shred of evidence I could find, the forged emails, the manipulated client reports, the discrepancies in project assignments. It was all there, a damning paper trail of his deceit. Lila was my rock through it all, helping me compile the files and offering a sympathetic ear when the weight of Ethan's actions threatened to crush me. "That bastard!" she seethed as we pored over the documents late one night. "I can't believe he'd stoop this low." I shook my head, fighting back tears of rage and humiliation. Believe it, this is who he really is. A selfish, insecure coward who'll do whatever it takes to get ahead. With the proof in hand, I requested an urgent meeting with Mr. Daniels, our CEO. He was a no-nonsense leader who valued integrity above all else. Surely he'd see Ethan for the snake he truly was. The day of the meeting, I barely slept, running through my presentation over and over. I had to get this right. My entire career was on the line. When I finally stood before Mr. Daniels, the weight of the moment nearly crushed me, but I pushed through, methodically laying out the evidence, pointing out each discrepancy, each forged signature, each reassigned client that had crippled my performance. To his credit, Mr. Daniels listened intently, his expression growing more grave with every revelation. When I finally finished, he leveled his piercing gaze at me. "Miss Bennett, these are extremely serious allegations. Do you have proof to substantiate your claims?" Without a word, I slid the thick file across his desk. He flipped through it, his frown deepening. Just then, the door opened, and Ethan strode in, that trademark smirk plastered across his face. "Sorry I'm late, everyone. What did I miss?" Mr. Daniels fixed him with an icy stare. "Mr. Bennett, can you explain why these client transfers and project reassignments were made without proper authorization?" For a split second, Ethan's mask slipped, revealing the panic simmering beneath. But he quickly regained his composure, letting out a nervous chuckle. "This has to be some kind of mistake, sir. I would never—" "No mistake," I cut him off, unable to contain my fury any longer. "You've been sabotaging me for months, undermining my work, forging my signatures, all to make yourself look better. And here's the proof." I shoved the file towards him, daring him to deny the mountain of evidence staring him in the face. Ethan paled as he flipped through the documents, his hands trembling. Mr. Daniels slammed his palm on the desk, making us both jump. "Enough of this. Mr. Bennett, you're suspended pending a full investigation. And if these allegations prove true, you'll be terminated immediately. Is that clear?" Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply nodded, his eyes downcast in defeat. As he slunk out of the office, I finally allowed myself a small, grim smile. The tides had turned, and Ethan was about to learn a brutal lesson about the price of betrayal. With Ethan suspended pending investigation, I thought I'd finally get some relief. But the storm was far from over. If anything, it was just the calm before the real tempest hit. Despite the damning evidence against him, Ethan still clung to his delusions of grandeur. He swanned around the office like nothing had happened, shooting me smug grins whenever our paths crossed. "Don't get too comfortable, Riley," he sneered one day as we passed in the hallway. "This is just a minor setback." I fought the urge to slap that arrogant smirk right off his face. "Keep telling yourself that, Ethan. The truth always comes out in the end." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond, just brushed past me with that infuriating swagger of his. I could practically feel his disdain radiating off him in waves. A part of me hoped he was right, that this was all just a big misunderstanding, and the man I'd once loved was still in there somewhere. But the larger, more pragmatic part knew better. Ethan was rotten to the core, a malignant narcissist who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be crushed. The real test came a few weeks later when we were scheduled to pitch a major international client. It was a make-or-break deal, one that could secure our firm's future for years to come. Naturally, Ethan insisted on leading the presentation, despite being under investigation. "This is my account, Riley," he said, puffing out his chest. "I've been prepping the team for months. You'd only get in the way." I wanted to protest, to point out how he'd fumbled the last major client meeting. But Mr. Daniels had made it clear we needed to put on a united front, at least until the investigation concluded. So I gritted my teeth and let Ethan take the lead, prepping him extensively on every possible scenario and objection. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally get it right this time. The day of the presentation, I could sense the tension as soon as we entered the conference room. Jessica Marshall, the no-nonsense client rep who had witnessed Ethan's meltdown before, eyed him warily from across the table. For the first half hour, Ethan stuck to the script, breezing through the high-level concepts and projections. But then, the tough questions started rolling in, the kinds that required deep technical knowledge and strategic thinking. And just like before, Ethan crumbled under the pressure. "So how exactly would your risk mitigation protocols adapt to fluctuations in the Asian markets?" Jessica pressed, her eyes boring into him. Ethan stammered, his carefully rehearsed facade cracking. "Well, you see, our platform utilizes cutting-edge algorithms too." He trailed off, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. I could see the client's interest waning by the second. Enough was enough. I wasn't about to let this arrogant fool torpedo the company I'd poured my life into. Squaring my shoulders, I leaned forward. "If I may," I interjected smoothly. "Our adaptive risk analytics employ real-time data modeling to anticipate market fluctuations and dynamically adjust our mitigation strategies accordingly." I laid it all out: the robust testing protocols, the seamless integration with our clients' existing systems, the proven results from our pilot programs. With each point, I could see Jessica's skepticism melting away, replaced by keen interest. By the time I'd finished, Ethan looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His face was beet red, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. As we filed out, he grabbed my arm in a vice-like grip, his eyes burning with impotent rage. "You just couldn't let me have this one moment, could you?" he hissed. "You had to swoop in and undermine me in front of everyone." I met his glare with stony resolve. "I was cleaning up your mess, Ethan. Again. Maybe if you'd actually listened during our prep session instead of coasting on blind arrogance, you could have handled those questions yourself." His grip tightened until it was nearly unbearable. For a split second, I wondered if he might hit me. But then his whole body seemed to deflate, the anger replaced by something far more chilling, cold, bitter hatred. Releasing my arm with a contemptuous shove, he turned and stormed off, leaving me to pick up the shattered pieces of his failure once more. After the disastrous client meeting, Ethan went into full meltdown mode. He ranted and raged to anyone who would listen, spinning wild tales about how I'd conspired against him, sabotaging his efforts at every turn. "She's been out to get me from the start," he'd snarl, spit flying from his lips. Couldn't stand the fact that I was more talented, more qualified for those big roles. His delusions knew no bounds. I was the one who'd built my career from the ground up, through blood, sweat, and tears. Not him. He was just a smooth-talking con man who'd schemed and cheated his way to the top, cutting anyone down who got in his way. But for all his bluster, the truth was rapidly catching up to him. Mr. Daniels had tasked an internal audit team to comb through our records, and the evidence they uncovered was utterly damning. Forged contracts, manipulated invoices, diverted client accounts, the extent of Ethan's deceit knew no bounds. He'd orchestrated an elaborate web of lies and misdirection, all to inflate his own performance at my expense. When Mr. Daniels called us into his office, I could tell he already knew the score. His face was grave, his eyes shining with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Mr. Bennett, Miss Riley," he began, his voice heavy. "The findings from the internal audit are disturbing, to say the least." He slid a thick file across the desk, the meticulously compiled paper trail of Ethan's transgressions. My heart pounded as I flipped through the documents, each one more shocking than the last. Ethan, however, remained infuriatingly smug. "With all due respect, sir, this is clearly a witch hunt orchestrated by my bitter ex-wife. I've been nothing but a model employee." "Save it," Mr. Daniels cut him off, his tone laced with disgust. "The evidence speaks for itself. Forged signatures, falsified reports, illicit client transfers. You violated every ethical code this company stands for." Ethan opened his mouth, but Mr. Daniels held up a hand, silencing him. "I don't want to hear another word out of you. You're terminated, effective immediately. Clear out your desk and turn in your credentials." For a moment, Ethan looked like he might argue. But one glance at the CEO's steely expression seemed to deflate him. He simply nodded, shoulders slumped in defeat. As he shuffled out, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness amidst the overwhelming sense of vindication. This man, this pathetic, broken shell of a human being, had once been my partner, my best friend. Where had it all gone so wrong? Mr. Daniels must have sensed my turmoil, because he cleared his throat gently. "Miss Riley, I can't begin to express how disappointed I am in Mr. Bennett's actions. But I want you to know we value your integrity and commitment to this company above all else." He slid another document across the desk, a contract promoting me to VP of Operations, Ethan's former role. "It's time for a fresh start, a renewed commitment to the principles that made Dovetail great. I can think of no one better to lead that charge than you." Tears stung my eyes as I accepted the contract, overcome with a heady mix of pride, relief, and sheer exhaustion. It was finally over. The lies, the betrayal, the constant battle to prove my worth. I'd won. But as I inked my name on that crisp new contract, I couldn't help but wonder at what cost that victory had come. In the aftermath of Ethan's spectacular downfall, I thought I'd finally find some sense of closure, of hard-won peace. But the wounds he'd inflicted ran deeper than I could have imagined. As I settled into my new role as VP of Operations, reorganizing teams and redoubling our commitment to ethics, the specters of his betrayal haunted me at every turn. I'd catch whispers in the hallway, colleagues shooting me furtive glances laced with pity and judgment. "Did you hear what that bastard did to Riley?" I always knew there was something off about him. It was like a endless drone in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the humiliation I'd endured at the hands of the man I'd once loved. Ethan, for his part, maintained a defiant front in the face of his spectacular downfall. He refused to acknowledge the depths of his deceit, instead painting himself as the victim of some grand conspiracy. Riley's always been threatened by my talent. He'd sneer whenever I saw him clearing out his belongings. She'll do anything to tear me down and make herself look good. I wanted to scream, to hurl every vile insult I could muster at his smug, delusional face. But I knew it would only give him more ammunition, more fuel for his twisted martyr complex. So I maintained a stoic silence, refusing to dignify his ranting with a response. Let him live in his pathetic fantasies. I had a company to rebuild. With Ethan finally banished, I doubled down on restructuring our operations, emphasizing transparency and accountability above all else. Gone were the shady backroom deals and cronyism that had enabled his rise to power. One by one, I assembled a new leadership team comprised of talented, principled individuals committed to restoring Dovetail's former glory. It was grueling work, long hours spent poring over organizational charts and performance metrics. Lila was my rock through it all, celebrating each minor victory with takeout and cheap wine in my makeshift office bedroom. "You're doing amazing, Rye," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "This place was a cesspool before, but you're making it something to be proud of again." Her words buoyed me through the toughest days, when cynicism and self-doubt threatened to drag me under. This was about more than just professional redemption. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I'd nearly lost to Ethan's poisonous influence. Of course, there was still the matter of my personal life to confront. Ethan and I had been more than just colleagues. We'd built a life, a future together that now lay in ashes. As the dust settled and the raw fury subsided, I knew we'd have to face the inevitable. It was a crisp fall evening when I requested that final meeting, the one I'd been dreading for months. Ethan swept into the sterile conference room, his cockiness dimmed but that infuriating smirk still firmly in place. Well, if it isn't the conquering hero herself," he sneered as I entered. "To what do I owe this pleasure, Miss VP?" I leveled my gaze at him, mustering every ounce of strength and composure. "Ethan, this isn't just about work, it's about us. What's left of us, anyway?" His bravado faltered just for a moment before the mask slipped back into place. "Oh, I see. You just couldn't resist one last chance to rub my face in your victory, could you?" I shook my head, suddenly bone-weary from the weight of it all. "You still don't get it, do you?" I said softly. "This was never about winning or losing. It was about trust, Ethan, and after everything you've done, that trust is broken beyond repair." For a fleeting instant, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or a glimmer of the man I'd once adored peeking through the ruins, but it was gone in a blink, smothered by that impenetrable veil of ego and denial. "Is that really what you think?" he muttered, unable to meet my gaze. "You know what? Don't answer that." With that, he turned and left, disappearing from my life as abruptly as he'd entered it all those years ago. And this time, I knew there would be no resurrection of the past, no rekindling of the love that had burned so bright before his betrayal snuffed it out. It was over, truly and finally over. And as I watched Ethan's retreating form, I felt an unexpected wave of sadness wash over me, not for what we'd lost, but for the man he could have been, the partner he should have been. But those regrets belonged to the past now. I had a future to build, one founded on the hard-won lessons born from his lies and manipulations. As I stepped back into the bustle of the office, my team's voices and laughter echoing through the halls, I felt a surge of pride and renewed purpose. This was my path, my redemption story, and I wasn't about to let Ethan Bennett's ghosts haunt me any longer. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. I needed that pick-me-up after last night's late conference call, but as I entered, I saw Patricia, my mother-in-law, standing by the sink with a frown on her face. "Michelle, why is the house always so unkempt?" Patricia snapped, her eyes narrowing as they scanned the room. "I hired a housekeeper to take care of everything," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. Patricia's disapproval had become a regular part of my mornings. Patricia scoffed. A real wife would do it herself. Before I could respond, Brian entered the kitchen, his shirt half-tucked and his tie askew. "Morning," he mumbled, barely looking up. I forced a smile. "Good morning. Coffee?" He nodded, and moved past Patricia without acknowledging her. I handed him a mug. He took a sip, then glanced around, seemingly for the first time noticing the tension. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes flicking between his mother and me. "Just discussing housekeeping," Patricia replied coldly, taking a seat. I sighed. "Brian, can we talk later? I have a lot on my plate today with the business." "Sure," he said absently, already scrolling through his phone. Esme, our housekeeper, walked in, breaking the awkward silence. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner, Mr. Turner." Patricia gave her a curt nod. "Esme, you missed a spot by the window yesterday." Esme smiled politely. "I'll take care of it right away." Patricia muttered something under her breath and left the kitchen, leaving an icy atmosphere behind her. I took a deep breath, my frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "Brian, can we have a serious conversation about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up from his phone, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "About what?" "Your mom's constant criticism. It's driving me crazy. I need your support here." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Michelle, she's just old-fashioned. She'll get used to things eventually." "Eventually? It's been years, Brian," I snapped. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine while she undermines me in our own home." His jaw tightened. "Look, she's my mom. You need to be more understanding." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "So, my feelings don't matter?" "They do," he replied, looking at his phone again. "But this isn't the time." "Fine," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "We'll talk later." The rest of the morning went by in a haze. I threw myself into work, finding solace in my growing e-commerce enterprise. Orders were coming in faster than we could fulfill them, and my team was working overtime. It was my escape, the one thing I had control over. Later that day, as I prepared dinner, the doorbell rang. It was my in-laws. Thomas gave me a polite smile, but Patricia's scowl never left her face. Dinner was a stiff affair, with Patricia dissecting every bite. "This tastes different," she commented, setting her fork down. "Michelle, did you change the recipe?" "No, Patricia, it's the same," I replied, barely managing to keep the irritation out of my voice. After dinner, Brian and I retreated to the living room. "We need to talk now," I said firmly. He sighed. "Michelle, I'm exhausted. Can we do this another time?" "No, Brian, we need to figure this out. This tension isn't sustainable." He finally looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man I'd married. Caring, attentive, but it faded quickly. "Fine," he said, "but I can't promise things will change." I nodded, feeling a mix of resolve and heartbreak. "We'll see." As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The seeds of discord had been planted, and I could only hope we could find a way to uproot them before they choked out what was left of our marriage. The next morning started with a hum of activity. I was in the midst of packing orders, the familiar rhythm of taping and labeling boxes giving me a sense of peace. Esme worked quietly in the background, tidying up the living room. Suddenly, Patricia barreled into my office. "Michelle," her voice was sharp, "the yard looks atrocious. When are you planning to do some gardening?" I barely looked up from my work. "I have a landscaper scheduled for tomorrow." "Why can't you just do it yourself?" "Patricia, I have a business to run. That's why we hire help." She huffed, crossing her arms. "Well, a good wife would manage both." I clenched my jaw, willing myself to stay calm. "I am managing both, just in a different way." Before she could respond, the front door opened and Brian walked in earlier than usual. "Brian," Patricia called out, her tone instantly softening. "Look at this mess. Doesn't it bother you?" Brian glanced at the unassembled boxes and packing materials strewn across my office. "It's just temporary," he said dismissively. "Michelle's business is doing well." Patricia turned to me, her eyes blazing. "So this is more important than your home? Your husband?" "Mom, please stop," Brian interrupted, sounding tired. "We've talked about this." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Have you? Doesn't seem like much has changed." With that, she stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Brian turned to me, exasperation evident on his face. "Michelle, I need you to work with me on this." "I'm trying, Brian, but she's impossible to please." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know it's hard. Just keep trying." The next few days followed a similar pattern. Patricia's disapproval was a constant shadow. One evening, as Brian and I prepared for dinner, I hesitated before broaching a sensitive subject. Brian, are you sure your parents don't have anywhere else to stay? He looked up from the casserole dish. Michelle, they're family. We can't just ask them to leave. But it's causing so much tension. It's affecting us. He shook his head. They're not going anywhere. We just have to find a way to get along. Dinner was another tense affair. Patricia criticized everything from the flavor of the soup to the way the table was set. Thomas remained mostly silent, occasionally nodding in agreement with his wife. After dinner, as Brian and I cleaned up, I finally let my frustration show. This can't go on, Brian. We're all miserable. He turned to me, a rare anger in his eyes. What do you want me to do, Michelle? Throw them out on the street? No, but we need boundaries. Your mom can't keep attacking me in our own home. He threw the dish towel down. I'm doing the best I can, all right? Maybe if you tried harder, she'd back off. His words cut deep. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Fine, I said quietly. I'll keep trying. The next morning, Esme was cleaning the guest bathroom when Patricia approached her. Esme, you missed the spot behind the toilet again. Esme's shoulders stiffened. I'll get it right away, Mrs. Turner. See that you do, Patricia snapped, turning on her heel and sending a cold glance my way. I clenched my fists, the urge to defend Esme strong, but I knew it would only result in more conflict. Brian's words from the night before echoed in my mind. Maybe if you tried harder, she'd back off. But a small, stubborn part of me doubted that anything I did would ever be good enough. As I tackled the day's work, I could feel the heavy weight of family tension pressing down on me. The whispers of disapproval from Patricia and the silent judgments from Thomas were suffocating. But there was no turning back. I had too much at stake to let their negativity derail me. I had to stay strong, even if it meant fighting this battle alone. Brian was getting home later and later. Each night I would sit in the living room, scrolling through my laptop while waiting for him. When he finally walked through the door, his tie loosened and his shirt wrinkled, I would try to strike up a conversation. Late again, I commented one night, not looking up from my screen. Yeah, he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Work's been crazy. I closed my laptop and watched him head to the kitchen. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sank into the couch opposite me. We need to talk about us, Brian. This distance between us is getting worse. He took a long sip of his beer, avoiding eye contact. I'm really tired, Michelle. Can we do this another time? This can't wait, I said, my frustration boiling over. We barely talk anymore. You're always at work or preoccupied. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm working hard to support us. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted us to support each other, but I feel like I'm doing this alone, I said quietly. You're never around. And when I am, all we do is fight, he shot back, his tone sharp. Before the argument could escalate, Patricia's voice cut through the air. What's all the noise about? Nothing, Mom. Just a disagreement, Brian said quickly, his demeanor shifting to appease her. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she looked at me. You should be more supportive of your husband, Michelle. He's working hard for this family. I clenched my fists under the table, willing myself to stay calm. I am supportive. I just want us to be a team. Patricia huffed. Maybe if you put as much effort into your marriage as you into your business, things would be better. Brian's phone buzzed, and he glanced down at the screen, frowning. I need to step out for a moment, he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. As he left, Patricia took a seat, her gaze fixed on me. Mark my words, Michelle, if you don't start acting like a real wife, you'll lose him. I felt a pang of fear but masked it with defiance. My business is important to this family. I'm doing the best I can. Patricia crossed her arms. You're using your business as an excuse. A real wife would manage both perfectly. Her words stung, but I refused to back down. I refuse to be a doormat, Patricia. She scoffed and stood up. Then don't be surprised when Brian finds someone who appreciates him. The rest of the evening was a blur. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake Patricia's words from my mind. The distance between Brian and me was growing, and I could feel the foundations of our marriage crumbling. But there had to be a way to fix it, to prove that I could be both a successful entrepreneur and a devoted wife. The days that followed didn't get any better. Brian's late-night absences became more frequent, and whenever we did talk, it was strained and filled with unspoken resentment. One evening, in a rare moment of solitude, I decided to confront Brian once and for all. As soon as he walked in, I didn't even give him a chance to sit. "Brian, we need to talk now." He looked exhausted but nodded, sitting down at the dining table. "All right, what is it?" My voice was steady but firm. "This can't go on. We need to fix whatever is broken between us before it's too late." He sighed and leaned back. "I'm not sure if it can be fixed, Michelle. We've drifted too far apart." My heart ached at his words. "But I still love you. Isn't that worth fighting for?" He shook his head, looking defeated. "I don't know anymore." Without another word, he stood up and walked away, leaving me sitting alone at the table, the weight of our strained relationship pressing down on me. Our foundation was cracking, and as much as I wanted to believe we could repair it, a growing sense of dread told me this was only the beginning of our downfall. I decided to treat myself to a solo brunch at our favorite cafe downtown. It had been a while since I indulged in some alone time, thanks to the relentless pressure at home. The cafe was buzzing with people, offering a comforting distraction from the growing tension in my life. I had just sat down with my latte when I heard a familiar voice. "Michelle, is that you?" I looked up to see Claire, my old college friend. "Claire, what a surprise!" She gave me a quick hug before sitting down. "I haven't seen you in ages. How have you been?" "Busy," I said, trying to muster a smile. "Work's been intense, and things at home, well, let's just say it's a bit chaotic." Claire tilted her head. "Want to talk about it?" Before I could respond, her eyes widened. "Wait, isn't that Brian over there?" I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. Brian was across the patio, laughing and sharing a drink with a woman I didn't recognize. "Who is she?" Claire whispered. My eyes were glued to the scene unfolding before me. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." Brian looked like he was having the time of his life, completely at ease with this stranger. My hands clenched around my coffee cup, thoughts racing. Claire placed a hand on my arm. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this." The rest of the brunch was a blur. My anger and confusion kept me on edge. As soon as I got home, I dug out the number of a private investigator I knew. It was time to uncover the truth. The following days were a whirlwind of activities. I kept my routine as normal as possible, silently coordinating with the investigator behind the scenes. Brian's absences were now tinged with suspicion rather than just frustration. Each day he grew more distant, and I grew more determined. A week later, the investigator called, confirming my worst fears. Brian was having an affair with a younger woman from his office. Hearing the news spawned a mixture of rage and heartbreak in me. That evening, after Patricia and Thomas had retreated to their room, I pulled Brian aside. "We need to talk. Now." He looked at me with that same tired expression but nodded. "Okay, what's on your mind?" I didn't waste any time. "I know about your affair, Brian. I saw you with her, and I have proof." His face went pale. "Michelle, let me explain." I cut him off, my voice shaking with anger. "Explain? How do you explain betraying our marriage?" He stammered, searching for words. "It's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated," I shouted, losing control. "You lied to me, to our family. How could you do this?" Patricia and Thomas appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" Patricia demanded. "This doesn't concern you, Patricia," I snapped, my eyes never leaving Brian's. Brian held up his hands, trying to calm the situation. "Michelle, please, let's talk about this privately." "No, I'm done talking in private. I'm done with secrets." My voice was firm. "We'll figure out what to do from here, but understand this. I'm not the problem. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I walked out, each step filled with a sense of finality. That night, I barely slept, the reality of my broken marriage weighing heavily on me. But a small part of me felt relief. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The next morning, Brian tried to talk to me again, but I was resolute. "I need space. If you want to fix this, you need to show me, not just tell me." He nodded, looking defeated. "I understand." I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: things had to change, and I would be the one to make it happen. Another sleepless night turned into a foggy morning. I sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched breakfast in front of me. Brian came down the stairs, looking worn out but determined. "Michelle, we need to talk," he began, sitting across from me. I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. Go ahead. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry. I know I've messed up, but we can fix this, can't we? I shook my head. It's not that simple, Brian. You broke my trust. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. But I love you, he insisted, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Love isn't enough. Actions speak louder than words, and your actions have shown where your priorities lie. Just then, Patricia walked in, sensing the tension. What's going on? She asked, her eyes narrowing. We're discussing our marriage, Patricia, I said. It doesn't concern you. It most certainly does, Patricia snapped. Everything about this family concerns me. My patience was wearing thin. Fine, then understand this. Brian has been unfaithful. Patricia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. How dare you accuse my son of such a thing? I have proof, I stated calmly, watching Brian's face turn pale again. Brian rose from his seat, his voice trembling. Mom, this is between Michelle and me. Patricia ignored him, turning to me with fury. You're lying. You're just trying to break this family apart. You've never been good enough for Brian. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly on the floor. I've always respected you and Thomas, even when you made it hard, but now I won't stand here and take this. Brian tried to step between us. Enough, both of you. This isn't helping. Patricia pointed a finger at me. You will regret treating my son this way. You're the problem here, not him. I felt my resolve harden. Patricia, your blind defense of Brian is exactly why we're in this mess. He needs to take responsibility, and you need to let us handle this. With that, I turned and left the room, the heavy weight of the confrontation pressing down on me. Upstairs, I packed a small suitcase, throwing in essentials. Brian followed me, desperation in his voice. Michelle, please don't go. We can work this out. I zipped my bag and looked at him, feeling a pang of sadness. I need some space. Staying here won't fix anything. Where will you go? He asked, his eyes pleading. I'll find a place. I have friends who can help. He stood there, defeated. I never wanted this. Neither did I said softly, but sometimes stepping away is the only way to save what's left. I moved past him and made my way down the stairs. Patricia was waiting, her eyes burning with resentment. Leaving won't fix anything, she hissed. It's a start, I replied, not looking back. As I walked out into the crisp morning air, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I had to reclaim my peace and rebuild my life from the ground up. I drove to Claire's house, grateful for her support during this chaotic time. She greeted me with a warm hug. You did the right thing, Michelle. Now you can start healing. Thanks, Claire, I said, my voice cracking slightly. That night, as I lay in Claire's guest room, I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened. My marriage, my life, everything felt like it was up in the air. But I knew one thing for sure. I had taken the first step toward taking control of my own destiny. In the silence, a new kind of resolve settled over me. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to thrive. The days after I moved in with Claire were a whirlwind of emotions. I threw myself into my work even more, determined to make my e-commerce business thrive. It was my escape, my sanctuary. One afternoon, Claire found me surrounded by shipping boxes. Michelle, you need a break. How about we grab some lunch? I hesitated, but then nodded. Yeah, I could use a change of scenery. We headed to a nearby bistro, and as we sat by the window, the sunlight streaming in felt almost therapeutic. Claire's phone buzzed and she glanced at it, her expression shifting. Michelle, have you heard from Brian? I shook my head. No, and I don't plan on reaching out. Why? She bit her lip. Word is going around that his job isn't going well. My heart tightened. What do you mean? Apparently his performance at work has been slipping. They're talking about demotion. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions. That's unfortunate, but I can't let it distract me. Claire nodded. Of course, it's just karma, isn't it? We finished our lunch, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I couldn't control what was happening to Brian, but I could control how I moved forward. Back at Claire's, I spent the evening strategizing for my business. Orders were pouring in, and my efforts were paying off. It felt good to have something positive to focus on amid the chaos. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. Hello? Michelle, it's Brian. I felt a surge of mixed feelings. Brian, what is it? I need to talk to you. Can we meet? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a cafe, the same one where I'd first seen him with the other woman. He looked disheveled, a shadow of his former self. "Michelle, I'm sorry," he began, his voice cracking. "Things have gotten worse. I've been demoted, and Patricia's spending is out of control. We're facing serious financial strain." I listened, my face showing no emotion. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" He looked desperate. "I thought maybe we could work things out, and you could help us. I need you." I almost laughed at the irony. "You kicked me out. Now you want my help?" "It's not like that. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right," he pleaded. "Patricia and I can't manage without you." I leaned back, shaking my head. "Brian, you made your choices. You chose her over me. Now you have to deal with the consequences." His eyes filled with tears. "Please, Michelle, for old time's sake." I stood up, feeling a wave of liberation. "You're on your own, Brian. I'm done cleaning up your mess." As I walked out, I felt a newfound sense of power. I wouldn't let him or anyone else drag me down again. Over the next few months, my business flourished. I hired more staff, expanded my product range, and saw profits soar. Each success was a stepping stone away from the pain Brian and his family had caused. One evening, as I was finalizing some orders, Claire walked in with a newspaper. "You need to see this." The headline read, "Turner Family Faces Eviction Amid Financial Crisis." I skimmed the article, seeing details about Brian's demotion and Patricia's compulsive spending leading them to near bankruptcy. A part of me felt a pang of pity, but it was overshadowed by the satisfaction of seeing karma play out. Later, I received another call from Brian. "Michelle, we need you. We've lost everything without you." His voice was broken, filled with regret. I took a deep breath. "You made your bed, now lie in it. Leave before I call the cops." He stammered, "Michelle, please." I hung up, feeling a sense of closure. I was finally free from their toxic influence. This was my time to thrive, and nothing would hold me back. I had just finished a productive meeting with my new team when my phone buzzed. It was an incoming call from Brian. I let it ring. After everything, I had no desire to hear his pleas again. The voicemail alert pinged immediately after. I couldn't resist listening, dreading another round of begging. Instead, I heard Patricia's voice, fraught with desperation. "Michelle, this is Patricia. We need to talk. Please call me back." I deleted the message without hesitation. I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their drama. Later that day, as I was packing up to leave, Claire called out to me from the other room. "Michelle, you need to see this," she said, her voice tense. I walked over and saw her holding a letter. My name was on the envelope, written in Brian's unmistakable handwriting. "It was under the door," Claire explained. I opened it reluctantly. The letter was long, filled with pleas for financial help and apologies from both Brian and Patricia. It ended with a stark admission. They were days from eviction and had nowhere else to turn. Tossing the letter into the trash, I felt a mix of anger and satisfaction. They were reaping the consequences of their actions, just as I was reaping the benefits of my hard work. That evening, I was unwinding with a glass of wine when the doorbell rang. Claire answered it, and I could hear raised voices from the hallway. Curiosity piqued, I walked over to see Brian and Patricia standing at the doorstep. "Michelle, we need to talk," Brian said urgently. "No," I replied firmly. "We have nothing to discuss." Patricia stepped forward, looking far older and more haggard than I remembered. "Please, Michelle, we're begging you. We have nowhere else to go." Seeing her in that state stirred something in me, but I quickly suppressed it. "You chose this path. I won't save you from its consequences." Brian's face crumpled. "Michelle, for the love of everything we had, just help us this once." Claire stepped in, her presence a comforting wall between me and them. "You need to leave. Michelle doesn't owe you anything." Brian reached out a hand. "Please, Michelle, this isn't just about us. Think of the memories, the good times." I shook my head. "Those memories have been tainted by your betrayal. You're not my responsibility anymore." Patricia's composure broke. "We'll be homeless. Is that what you want?" "It's not what I want," I said quietly, "but it's what you deserve. My help comes at the cost of my peace, and that's too high a price." Brian's shoulders slumped. "I understand. We'll go." As they turned to leave, I called out, "Brian, wait." He turned back, hope flickering in his eyes. "I hope this teaches you something. Life is about choices, and you made yours. Now live with the consequences. With a final nod, they walked away. The door closed and the silence was deafening. Claire put a comforting hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. I know, I replied, feeling a strange sense of liberation. They needed to hear that. The following week saw my business continue to grow, and for the first time in a long while I felt genuinely happy. My decisions were my own, untainted by the toxic influences of Brian and Patricia. One evening as Claire and I sat down for dinner, she raised her glass. To new beginnings and leaving the past behind. We clinked glasses, and I smiled. To never giving up and moving forward. With Brian and Patricia out of my life, I could finally focus on the future. They had made their bed, and now they were lying in it. And for the first time, peace felt like a tangible reality. In the end, I realized something powerful. Revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about reclaiming my own happiness, and in that, I'd succeeded beyond measure. The weeks turned into months, and life steadily moved forward. My business was not only surviving but thriving in ways I'd never imagined. I hired more people, launched new products, and expanded into different markets. It felt like a dream. One morning, I sat in my sunlit office, sipping coffee and reviewing sales reports. Claire walked in, a grin on her face. Michelle, guess what? We just hit a milestone in revenue. You're absolutely killing it. A genuine smile spread across my face. That's amazing news, Claire. Let's set up a team celebration. Already planned, she said with a wink. By the way, have you thought about taking some time off? You deserve it. I pondered her suggestion for a moment. You know, I think I will. Later that week, I found myself packing for a weekend getaway. For the first time in ages, I felt light, almost carefree. Before leaving, Claire hugged me, her support always unwavering. Enjoy yourself, Michelle. You've earned this. The cabin I rented was secluded and peaceful, surrounded by towering trees and a babbling brook. As I settled in, I felt a deep sense of tranquility. The past few months had been a whirlwind, but now I could finally breathe. On the second day, while exploring a hiking trail, I bumped into an old acquaintance from college, David. Michelle? Is that you? He asked, his eyes wide with surprise. David, what a small world, I replied, genuinely happy to see a familiar face. We caught up over coffee at a quaint nearby cafe. He shared stories about his own entrepreneurial journey, and I filled him in on what had been happening in my life. After a while, he leaned in, his voice softening. I heard about you and Brian. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I shrugged, feeling a strange calm. It's in the past, David. I'm focused on the future now, he smiled. That's the spirit. Life's too short to dwell on what's gone wrong. As the weekend drew to a close, I felt rejuvenated and inspired. The brief rekindling of an old friendship reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about me and my success. Returning to work, I threw myself back into the hustle, more determined than ever. One evening, while Claire and I were discussing a potential business partnership, she asked, Have you talked to Brian or his family lately? I shook my head. No, and I have no reason to. Good, she said firmly. They're not worth your time or effort. I agreed, feeling a sense of closure. I realized now that revenge wasn't a lingering desire to see them suffer, but rather my own victory in finding happiness and success despite their attempts to bring me down. A few weeks later, I attended a networking event. While mingling, I spotted Emily, the woman Brian had an affair with. She approached me hesitantly. Michelle, can we talk? I considered walking away but decided against it. What is it? Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm so sorry for everything. Brian and it was a huge mistake. I looked at her, feeling only pity. Emily, your apology is too late. I've moved on. She nodded, her regret palpable. I understand. I just needed to say it. As she walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Confronting the person who had contributed to my pain and remaining unshaken was empowering. The night went on, and I connected with several potential business partners. It felt like the universe was rewarding me for pushing through the challenges. Brian and his family were now a distant memory, fading into the backdrop of my thriving life. Back at home, I sat with Claire over a glass of wine. We talked about future plans, possible expansions, and even personal dreams. To new beginnings, she toasted. I clinked my glass with hers, feeling a warmth spread through me. To moving forward. In that moment, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I was ready. I had faced the storm and emerged stronger. Now it was time to embrace the sunshine and let the past dissolve into a lesson learned. I stared at Jake in disbelief, the papers he'd slammed on the counter feeling like a physical blow. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my efforts to remain calm. Sarah smirked from the doorway. "It's pretty simple, Laura. This house belongs to Kyle and me now. You're being evicted." "Evicted?" I echoed, my mind racing. How could this be happening? This was my home, the home I'd poured my heart and soul into building with Jake after we married 15 years ago. Jake's expression was cold, devoid of the warmth I'd once seen in his eyes. "The deed is in our name now. You have 30 days to get out." Anger flared within me, burning away the initial shock. "You can't do this," I cried, rounding on him. "This house was my dream, my life's work, after everything I sacrificed to make this happen for us." "For us?" Jake cut me off with a harsh laugh. "Don't delude yourself, Laura. This was always about you and your selfish desires." But the words stung like a slap to the face. Selfish? I was the one who'd worked tirelessly to build my kimono dressing business from the ground up, all so we could have a comfortable life together. While Jake spent his days golfing and gambling, I was the one bringing in a steady income, saving every penny to make our dream home a reality. Sarah's snide voice broke through my thoughts. "Listen to your husband, Laura. It's time for you to move on and let the next generation take over." I opened my mouth to protest, but the smug looks on their faces stopped me cold. In that moment, I realized the truth. They'd been plotting this for who knows how long, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Well, if they thought I was going down without a fight, they had another thing coming. "Fine," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "I'll go, for now." I met Jake's gaze, letting the fire in my eyes convey the message he'd regret this betrayal. As I turned and walked away, Sarah's mocking laughter followed me out. But I didn't care. A plan was already forming in my mind, a plan that would make them pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation they'd caused me. They wanted to play dirty? I'd show them just how dirty I could get. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and by the time I was done, they'd be left out in the cold with nothing. I sat on the couch in Megan and Eric's living room, staring blankly at the muted TV. My body was there, but my mind kept replaying the events of the past 24 hours like a broken record. "Mom?" Megan's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She settled beside me, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" I forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, honey, just processing everything." "I can't believe Dad and Sarah did this," she said, shaking her head. "Kicking you out of your own home? That's low, even for them." Anger flashed in her eyes, and I was reminded of just how protective Megan had always been of me, especially after her father walked out when she was just a kid. She'd been my rock through those tough times, and I had a feeling I'd be leaning on her strength again in the days to come. I should have seen it coming, I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. The signs were there, Jake's constant business trips, the way he and Sarah would whisper behind closed doors. I just didn't want to believe they could be so cruel. Megan reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure this out, Mom, I promise. They're not going to get away with treating you like this." Her determination was reassuring, but a part of me still felt lost, adrift in a sea of betrayal. This wasn't just about losing my home. It was about having the rug pulled out from under me by the people I'd trusted most in this world. "I keep running it over and over in my mind," I confessed. "All the times Jake promised we were building this house for our future, for our family. And now—" I trailed off, blinking back tears. "Now we know it was all a lie," Megan finished, her jaw set in a hard line. "But we're going to make them pay for every single one of those lies, Mom. I swear it." I studied her for a moment, seeing the fire in her eyes that had always been my source of strength. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop wallowing and start fighting back. "You're right," I said, straightening my shoulders. "We can't let them get away with this. Not after everything I sacrificed to give us a good life." Megan nodded, a determined gleam in her eye. "Exactly. So what's our first move?" I thought for a moment, then smiled, a slow, predatory grin that would have made even Jake shudder. "First, we find out exactly what your dear old dad and that snake Sarah have been up to behind my back, and then—" I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Then we make them regret the day they ever crossed me. As I laid out the beginnings of my plan, I could feel the shadows of doubt and hurt receding. In their place, a bright, burning flame of vengeance took hold, and I knew Jake and Sarah were going to get burned. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Megan muttered, staring at the computer screen in disbelief. "Dad has been siphoning money from your business accounts for years." I leaned closer, my heart pounding as I took in the financial records she'd uncovered. Canceled checks, wire transfers, mysterious cash withdrawals. It was all laid out in black and white, a twisted web of deceit that made me feel sick to my stomach. "That lying, cheating snake," I spat, clenching my fists. "All those times he claimed the business was struggling, that we needed to tighten our belts, he was robbing me blind the whole time." Megan shook her head slowly. "It gets worse, Mom. Look at these credit card statements." She clicked over to a new window, and my jaw dropped as I scanned the charges. Designer clothes, lavish vacations, even a brand new sports car. He bought all of that with my hard-earned money? I could barely process the depths of Jake's betrayal. How could he do this to me, to our family? "Because he's a selfish, greedy bastard who only cares about himself," Megan snarled, an uncharacteristic venom in her voice. "And it looks like Sarah was in on the whole thing." She gestured to a series of emails, detailing shady financial dealings and coded messages about covering their tracks. My stomach churned as I read through them, the truth sinking in with each damning line. They've been playing us for fools all along, I realized, my voice hollow. Everything, the house, the business, our entire life together, it was all built on lies. For a moment, the anger and hurt threatened to consume me. I could feel the familiar sting of tears pricking my eyes as years of memories were tainted by this harsh new reality. But then I caught sight of Megan's expression, jaw set, eyes blazing with righteous fury, and a different kind of fire ignited within me. "You know what?" I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm done crying over those two snakes. It's time we took the fight to them." Megan's lips curved into a predatory grin. "I was hoping you'd say that. What did you have in mind?" A plan was already taking shape, one that would hit Jake and Sarah where it hurt most, their reputations, their social standing, their entire carefully constructed facade of respectability. "We're going to expose them for the liars and thieves they really are," I declared, feeling a rush of vindictive glee. "Let's see how smug they are when the whole world knows what kind of people they truly are." Megan nodded, her expression fierce. "Consider it done, Mom. Those two are going to wish they never messed with us." As we dove back into the evidence, plotting our next move, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. Jake and Sarah had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and by the time I was through with them, they'd be the ones left with nothing. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Mom?" Megan asked, eyeing the hidden camera warily. "What if they find out?" I waved a dismissive hand. "They won't suspect a thing. Not with the little act we've cooked up." I shot her a conspiratorial grin. "Just follow my lead. Okay?" She nodded, though the doubt lingered in her eyes. I couldn't blame her. The plan we'd devised to catch Jake and Sarah red-handed was risky, to say the least. But at this point, I was past caring about playing it safe. Those two had taken everything from me. It was time I returned the favor. The doorbell rang, and I took a steadying breath before pasting on a bright, cheery smile. That must be them. Showtime. I flung open the door to find Jake and Sarah standing on the porch, twin expressions of disdain on their faces. "Laura," Jake said, his tone clipped, "I didn't expect to hear from you again so soon." "Well, you know me. I like to keep an open line of communication in this family," I replied breezily. "Speaking of which, I'm so glad you two could come over today. Megan and I have been doing a lot of thinking." Sarah arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Is that so? And what brilliant insights did you come up with this time?" The sarcasm in her voice grated on my nerves, but I refused to take the bait. Not yet, at least. "Why don't you come in and have a seat?" I suggested, gesturing toward the living room. "I'll get us all something to drink, and we can discuss it like the loving family we are." Jake snorted derisively, but allowed me to usher them inside. As I busied myself in the kitchen, I could hear their hushed voices filtering in from the other room, no doubt griping about this little get-together already. Perfect. I returned a few minutes later, a tray of glasses in hand. Here we are, I chirped, setting it down on the coffee table. I thought we could start with a nice toast. A toast? Jake eyed the drink suspiciously. To what exactly? To new beginnings, I replied, holding up my glass with a serene smile. I've had some time to think about everything that's happened, and I've realized something important. I paused for dramatic effect. I was wrong to react the way I did. This is your house now, and I need to respect that. Shock flickered across their faces. Clearly, this wasn't the reaction they'd expected. Good. Let them squirm a little. You're being serious? Sarah sputtered. After all that talk about revenge and making us pay? I shook my head sadly. I was just lashing out, saying things I didn't really mean. The truth is, you two were right all along. I'd overstayed my welcome, and it's time for me to move on with my life. I raised my glass again, the picture of sincerity. So, to family and to new beginnings. For a beat, they just stared at me, dumbfounded. Then, like a switch being flipped, their expressions morphed into matching sneers of cruel triumph. Well, well, Jake chuckled darkly, lifting his own glass. I have to say, Laura, I didn't think you had it in you to be reasonable, but I'm glad you've finally seen the light. Sarah clinked her drink against his, that sickly sweet smile never wavering. Yes, this is for the best. After all, we did try to warn you, but you just wouldn't listen, would you? My grip tightened on my own glass as they taunted me, every fiber of my being screaming to wipe those smug looks off their faces. But I held firm, forcing myself to nod and smile through gritted teeth. You're absolutely right, I agreed, the words like ash in my mouth. I should have listened to you both from the start. I'm just so grateful you're giving me another chance. The lies dripped from my tongue like poisoned honey, but it was worth it to see them preen and puff up with self-satisfaction. Megan caught my eye from across the room, giving an almost imperceptible nod. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for them to spring it themselves. The video went viral within hours. I sat on the couch, my phone buzzing incessantly as the shocking footage of Jake and Sarah's cruel taunts spread like wildfire across social media. Megan had worked her tech magic, editing the clips into a damning expose and blasting it out to every corner of the internet. I can't believe how many people have seen this already, she murmured, scrolling through the deluge of comments and shares. The reaction has been insane. I nodded mutely, my gaze fixated on the screen as the video played again. There they were, my beloved husband and his conniving accomplice, sneering and gloating over their betrayal without the slightest shred of remorse. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was eclipsed by a burning sense of vindication as the world bore witness to their true ugly natures. My phone chimed again, and I glanced down to see a text from an old friend. Did you see what Laura posted? I'm horrified. Another buzz. Your son and that witch of a wife have some nerve kicking you out like that after everything you sacrificed. The messages kept pouring in, a tidal wave of support and outrage on my behalf. With every notification, I could feel the tide turning in my favor. Well, well, I murmured, unable to keep the smug satisfaction from my voice. Looks like the masses have spoken. Megan grinned, riding the high of our well-executed plan. I told you this would work, Mom. Now the whole world knows exactly who the real victims are here. As if on cue, my phone started ringing, the caller ID flashing Jake's number. I smirked and hit ignore, letting it go to voicemail as a fresh wave of texts flooded in. How dare they treat you like that? You're handling this with such grace, Laura. Stay strong. If my husband ever pulled something like this, I'd leave him in a heartbeat. With each message, I could practically feel their reputations crumbling beneath the weight of public scorn. The tangible outrage, the unwavering condemnation, it was the ultimate revenge, far more potent than any physical act of retaliation. You know, I mused aloud, I used to worry about what people thought of me and my little kimono business, but this? I gestured to the screen, watching the comments multiply by the second. This is a whole new level of notoriety. Megan laughed, high-fiving me with a mischievous gleam in her eye. Just you wait, Mom. By the time we're through, your name is going to be a household phrase for don't mess with this lady. My phone started ringing again. Sarah's number this time. I rolled my eyes and declined the call, picturing her pacing furiously as the world turned against her. Let her stew in her own misery for a while. As the outpouring of support continued, one thing became crystal clear. Jake and Sarah had made a fatal miscalculation in underestimating me. They'd thought they could cast me aside like yesterday's trash, leaving me powerless and alone. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Now I had an entire army rallying behind me, thirsting for justice on my behalf, and they were just getting started. A wicked grin curved my lips as I leaned back, basking in the sweet taste of vindication. "You wanted a war?" I murmured. "Well, you've got one now, and this time I'm not taking any prisoners." The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days of the video going viral, Sarah was called into her boss's office and unceremoniously fired from her cushy marketing job. Apparently, having an employee publicly exposed as a lying, manipulative schemer wasn't great for the company image. "I can't believe this is happening," she'd sobbed into the phone when she called to vent her outrage. "After everything I've done for that company, they're just tossing me aside like garbage." I had to bite back a scathing retort about the irony of her words. Instead, I forced myself to make sympathetic noises, all while savoring the delicious taste of her misery. As for Jake, the dominoes were falling just as rapidly. His golf club terminated his membership, his gambling buddies stopped taking his calls, and the investors in his fledgling business venture began jumping ship en masse. "You've ruined me," he'd roared when he finally deigned to show up on Megan's doorstep, red-faced and eyes wild with impotent rage. "Everything I've worked for gone because of your little temper tantrum." I simply arched an eyebrow, unimpressed by his bluster. "I'm sorry. Are you referring to the house and lifestyle you stole from me through years of deception and theft? Because if so, I'd say you got what you deserved." His face purpled with fury, and for a moment I thought he might actually strike me. But Megan stepped between us, her expression thunderous. "Don't even think about it, Dad," she spat, every inch the protective lioness. "You're the one who made your bed, and now you can lie in it." With an incoherent snarl, Jake turned and stormed away, leaving us both staring after him. Me with grim satisfaction, Megan with a look of utter disgust. "I can't believe I'm actually related to that jackass," she muttered, shaking her head slowly. I reached out and squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of gratitude for her unwavering support. Without her in my corner, I doubt I would have found the strength to take Jake and Sarah down. As the days ticked by, reports of their ongoing downward spiral continued to trickle in. Sarah had been forced to move back in with her parents, her once enviable designer wardrobe and luxury car repossessed to cover her debts. Meanwhile, Jake was drowning in a sea of legal troubles, fending off everyone from jilted investors to the IRS. With each new humiliation they suffered, I felt a deep, primal sense of satisfaction unfurling within me. This was justice, cold and exquisitely merciless, and they had no one to blame but themselves. One afternoon, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it warily, half expecting another frantic plea for mercy from Jake or Sarah, but the message that awaited me was from an entirely different source. "Mom, it's Kyle. I saw the video and I don't even know what to say. I had no idea Dad and Sarah were capable of something so vile. I'm so sorry." I stared at the words, an uncharacteristic lump forming in my throat. My eldest son, the one who had turned his back on me so callously in the beginning, was finally seeing the truth. As I tapped out a reply, tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but this time they weren't born of sadness or anger. This time they were tears of relief, of redemption, of a mother's love prevailing against all odds. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for healing the deepest of family wounds. But as for Jake and Sarah, they'd gotten exactly what they deserved, and I wasn't shedding a single tear for their well-earned misery. The knock at the door was tentative, almost apologetic. I glanced at Megan, who shrugged before crossing the living room to answer it. The sight that greeted me on the other side very nearly took my breath away. There stood Jake and Sarah, looking utterly defeated, a stark contrast to the smug, self-assured personas they'd projected for so long. "Laura," Jake began, his voice little more than a raspy croak. He opened his mouth as if to continue, then seemed to think better of it, gaze dropping to the floor in dejected silence. I studied them for a long moment, taking in the haunted look in Jake's eyes, the way Sarah's once immaculate appearance had deteriorated into unkempt disarray. Part of me felt a perverse thrill at seeing them brought so low. But an even bigger part simply felt tired, bone-deep weary of the never-ending drama and mind games. "What do you want?" I asked at last, keeping my tone carefully neutral. Sarah flinched as if I'd struck her. "We?" She swallowed hard. "We just wanted to see if the stories were true. That you're taking the house back." My lips pressed into a grim line. "Those stories don't even begin to scratch the surface. But yes, it's true. The house is being returned to its rightful owner, thanks to the efforts of some very dedicated people." Something like hope flickered in Jake's eyes. "Laura, please, you have to help us. We have nowhere else to go." "Nowhere else to go," I echoed, arching an incredulous eyebrow. "And whose fault is that, exactly?" The question hung heavy in the air, laden with all the hurt and betrayal of the past several months. Sarah's gaze slid away, fresh shame coloring her cheeks. "We made mistakes," Jake admitted, his voice little more than a hoarse rasp. "Horrible, unforgivable mistakes. But you—" He raised his head, and I was struck by how utterly broken he looked in that moment. "You were my wife, Laura, the love of my life. Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore?" His words wormed their way past my defenses, stirring up embers of the affection I'd once felt for this man. The man he'd been before greed and hubris corrupted him utterly. Despite everything, some small, stubborn part of me still longed for the life we'd once dreamed of sharing. But those embers were banked by a harsh, immutable truth. That life was gone, ashes scattered by the winds of betrayal and deceit. Jake and Sarah had burned that bridge themselves, and I was too old and too weary to rebuild it from the ground up. "It means everything," I said at last, my voice thick. "That's why this hurts so much, Jake. That's why your actions cut me so deeply." I shook my head, blinking back the sting of tears. "But we can't go back. What's done is done. All I can do now is move forward, surrounding myself with the people who truly care about me." My gaze slid to Megan, hovering protectively in the hallway, and the love shining in her eyes gave me strength. Turning back to Jake and Sarah, I straightened my shoulders. "I'm sorry you two find yourselves in this position. But you brought it on yourselves, and those are consequences you're going to have to live with." For a beat, they simply stared at me, twin expressions of devastated disbelief etched across their features. Then, with a broken sound halfway between a sob and a snarl, Sarah whirled and stalked away, leaving Jake to follow in her wake. I watched them go, that bone-deep weariness settling over me once more. A chapter of my life had ended, painful though the parting had been. But as the door swung shut behind them, I felt a strange sense of lightness, of freedom. Crossing the room, I sank onto the couch beside Megan and rested my head on her shoulder, letting the tears come at last. They weren't tears of anguish or bitterness, though. They were tears of release, of rebirth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new beginnings, but for now I simply allowed myself to feel the profound relief of having shed a burden I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Jake and Sarah were out of my life for good. And strangely, for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt truly at peace. The sun peeked through the curtains, bathing the living room in a warm, golden glow. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the rich aroma and the peaceful quiet of the morning. So much had changed in the past few months, and yet, sitting here, surrounded by Megan and Eric's familiar furnishings, I felt more at home than I had in years. The weight of Jake and Sarah's betrayal no longer pressed down on me, replaced by a sense of liberation I hadn't dared dream possible. "Morning, Mom." Megan shuffled in, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "You're up early." I smiled, patting the spot beside me on the couch. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind, I guess." She settled next to me, draping a blanket over our laps. "Everything okay? You're not having second thoughts about—" No, I assured her quickly. "Nothing like that. I'm just thinking about the future for once, about what comes next." Megan's face broke into a grin. "Well, in that case, I've got some good news that might help with those thoughts." My brow furrowed curiously as she grabbed her laptop from the coffee table, tapping away for a few moments before turning the screen to face me. There, in stark digital text, was a real estate listing for a charming little house not far from here, complete with a beautiful sunroom that would be perfect for... "You're not seriously thinking of opening another kimono studio, are you?" I couldn't keep the delight from my voice. Megan shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Well, we can't have you just sitting around collecting dust now, can we? Besides, everyone could use a few more opportunities for zen in their lives these days. Tears pricked my eyes as I studied the listing, picturing the space already. The soft lighting, the serene decor, the quiet dignity of my life's passion finally being restored. After everything I'd endured, the idea of reclaiming that part of myself was almost overwhelming. Megan, words failed me for a moment. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have made it through this nightmare without you by my side. She bumped my shoulder affectionately. What are daughters for? Although I have to admit, watching you take down Dad and the Wicked Witch of Westchester was pretty satisfying in itself. We shared a conspiratorial grin, reveling in the memories of our hard-won victories. Jake and Sarah's appalled, ashen faces as the world turned against them would forever be seared into my mind. A small part of me wondered if I should feel guilty for taking such pleasure in their downfall. But the larger part, the part that had spent decades putting their needs and wants above my own, couldn't muster an ounce of remorse. They'd made their choices, and I'd simply ensured they faced the consequences. So, Megan began, bringing me back to the present, what do you think? You ready to dive back into the wonderful world of kimono dressing? I studied the listing once more, drinking in every lovingly captured detail, and felt a surge of excitement I hadn't experienced in far too long. This was my chance to start over, to rebuild the life I'd sacrificed so much for, but on my own terms this time. Meeting Megan's warm, hopeful gaze, I felt a brilliant smile blooming across my face. You know what? I declared, something like my old fire rekindling in my chest. I really think I am. There would be no more compromises, no more settling. The future was a blank canvas, and I was finally free to paint it in whatever bold, vibrant strokes I chose. As I pulled Megan into a fierce hug, I silently thanked whatever cosmic forces had given me the strength to endure the darkness and emerge into the light, ready to seize this new beginning with both hands. The past was over, a closed chapter tinged with hard-won lessons and bittersweet memories. But the future? Well, that was mine for the taking, and this time nothing was going to stand in my way.